Chapter 42. Seeing this scene, Li Yunxin's heart skipped a beat. When he passed by him he greeted, "Oh, so fast." The servant had already seen Li Yunxin's clothes. In order to keep a low profile today he only wore a green Daoist robe with a wooden hairpin in his hair. But his appearance saved everything. He still looked noble and out of this world, like a young master in disguise. The young manservant was obviously happy to have such a beautiful person greet him. So he stopped and looked down at the food box in his hand. He thought it would be okay to say a few words, so he smiled. "Yes. Young master, you look unfamiliar. Did you just come to the city of Wei?" "Sort of. The weather here is a bit strange." Li Yunxin tightened his collar. "I didn't feel it before crossing the bridge. But after crossing the bridge and entering this street, I felt the temperature drop." When he said this, the servant was standing in front of the faceless ghosts who were staring at him. One of them was almost as heavy as him. The servant frowned. You are right. I was just saying there was something evil about this street today. When I came out of the mansion and entered this street I felt cold. Now my God, isn't it the spring chill? The cold wind is blowing into my neck." You are from the mansion. From the magistrate's mansion?" Li Yunxin's eyes brightened and asked with interest. "Hey, I am a third-class servant." The servant smiled reservedly and then seemed to realize that this young master probably didn't know what third-class servant meant. So he explained, "It is quite comfortable. There is silver every new year. After a year of frugality I can have 20 taels of silver. After a few years of saving I can buy a few acres of land in my hometown, then, well." Speaking of this, he felt that this young master was probably not interested in these things, so he stopped talking. Unexpectedly, Li Yunxin stood up straight and leaned forward slightly as if he was very interested. "This is really good. Little brother, you've found yourself a good master. In my hometown it is not so good." He was good-looking. When he pretended to be kind, it made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. Coupled with his previous professional experience, he was a master at conversing with people. In the end, the young man slapped the back of his head. The snacks in the food box had all gone cold. He quickly excused himself to Li Yunxin and trotted into the alley. Li Yunxin took another look at the house in the darkness and walked back with his hands behind his back. With the Yin spirit formation he didn't want to attract anyone's attention. Thus he could only obtain information through a few words. After a round of questioning, coupled with his own deductions and analysis, he had a rough idea of what was going on. His initial conjecture was correct. The Qiao family and Governor Li wanted Lao Dao's courtyard. Whether it was the Qiao family or the governor, they had no prejudice against Lu Laodao and himself. They just wanted money. Li Yunxin had long understood the thoughts of the three Qiao family members. Lao Dao's real estate was indeed a huge fortune for them. Besides, the old man had no children. He was just a strange young man, so he didn't take him seriously. As for Governor Li, at first he didn't understand why such an official would give up so many ways to make money, but had to take the risk of arousing public resentment and tarnishing his own reputation to conspire for a real estate under his rule. At this time he roughly figured it out. Governor Li seemed to have offended someone. A very powerful person. A person who could threaten his life. Prefectural Magistrate Li spent all his wealth and begged the masters of Taoism and sword sect in the city of Wei to make such a nether spirit formation to protect his house. The manservant named Zhe also felt that the street was chilly tonight. It could be seen that this big formation was indeed newly built. Governor Li was short of money and he was not an upright official. The Qiao family gave her a good thing and bullied a destitute old Taoist. Li Yunxin felt that she would probably do this if she was in the position of prefectural magistrate Li. Thinking of this, he let out a sigh of relief. Originally he was so concerned because he was afraid that there were other secrets. For example, he was targeted by someone. Now it seemed that he was just unlucky to be involved in it. It couldn't be said like this. Maybe it was someone else who was unlucky. He walked all the way back to the temple and his thoughts were almost sorted out. He pushed the door closed and went into the backyard. When he entered the main room he found that the table was already filled with food. Thin slices of beef with soy sauce were placed in the center. The meat was almost transparent and the sauce on the meat was soft and fragrant. Around it was a plate of crispy peanuts which were yellow and plump, a plate of stir-fried pork with hibiscus, with jade-colored hibiscus slices and red and green peppers, a plate of spicy chicken with bamboo shoots. The chicken was cooked in the pot and then it was scooped up when it was tender. It was served with bamboo shoots picked in the spring morning, which was fragrant and sweet. Next to the 4 dishes there was a small silver wine pot. Li Yunxin was happy at first sight. Wasn't this the one that Lu Laodao treasured the most? Usually he was afraid of knocking it out when he took it out. This Laodao really doted on his old friend. Li Yunxin sat at the table and picked up a few peanuts with his chopsticks. The more he chewed, the more fragrant it became. Then he picked up a piece of bamboo shoots to eat. When his mouth had a little taste, he went to eat the beef with soy sauce. After a few mouthfuls, he poured a glass of wine and sent it into his mouth. The wine was not strong and it was long and refreshing when it entered his throat. When it reached his stomach, it was warm and harmonious. It really dispelled the tiredness of the day. He drank another glass of wine before he saw Lu Laodao coming in from outside the door. He observed his expression, wanting to say something but hesitating. Li Yunxin found it funny. Lu Laodao was an old man, but in front of a kid like him he behaved like a kid. He raised his chin and asked, "Have you eaten?" Laodao sat next to the table and stared at him. He asked eagerly, "Brother Xen, how is it?" Li Yunxin told him about this matter in detail. But Laodao was obviously more concerned about something else. "My old friend. If Governor Li is determined to do this, no one can save him." Li Yunxin put down his chopsticks and looked at Laodao seriously. "No one can persuade him. Because this matter will be related to his family's life. What else is more important than this? So, if you want to save your old friend, you have to take drastic measures. Solve the problem of Governor Li." Laodao thought for a while and blinked his eyes. "Brother Xen means to help him get through this disaster? Protect him? How can we do that? Even a governor can't do anything. Li Yunxin looked at him strangely. "Your idea is so strange. Why do you want to help him?" He picked up a peanut and threw it into his mouth, then smiled. "He wants to kill me and I want to help him. I am so despicable. That Governor Li, won't it be over if we kill him?" Chapter 43. As soon as he said this, Laodao tried to cover his mouth. But he didn't make a fool of himself. He just bowed and sat down again. But he still lowered his voice. "Brother Xen, alas. How can you say that? The prefectural magistrate is such a big figure. He's the father and mother in the city of Wei. Even in the imperial court of the Daqing state, how many officials are there? Brother Xen, don't mention this again. If anything happens to prefectural magistrate Brother Xen, you also don't want to. I don't want to be noticed." Li Yunxin poured a glass of wine for Laodao and shook his head with a smile. "But I won't be happy if this thing goes on. The best result is that we move out of this house and find another place to live. Then my mind won't be clear. I don't bully people, but I don't want to be bullied. I'm standing here but you came and kicked me. What's the meaning of this? The worst result is that the house will be confiscated and we'll have to eat in jail. At that time, it's hard for me not to expose my identity. I only slept on a straw bed in Qinghe for a few days. Let me tell you, I choose my bed well and I'm angry when I get up. Once I don't sleep well, I want to mess with people. So, you see, we can only kill him. He's just a prefectural magistrate of the Daqing state. What's so great about him? Who would think that I, a little Taoist boy, could kill him? Or you, an old man, could do it? There's a big nether formation set by the masters of Daotong and Kenzo outside his house. He has enemies and they're very powerful. Once he's dead, people will think it's done by his enemies and it's none of my business. At that time we'll deal with the Qiao family and they won't make trouble anymore. Who will remember the Hongfu escort agency? If your old friend is still lucky, he can also get out of trouble. What are you waiting for? Drink the wine and think about it. Am I talking about Li Jufu?" Laodao didn't know who Li Jufu was. But after thinking about it, although he felt that Li Yunxin's analysis was reasonable, he still felt that something was wrong. After drinking the wine, he smacked his lips and realized the problem. "But Brother Xen, how did you, kill him?" Laodao still didn't say those treasonous words out loud. "Brother Xen also said that he has the protection of the array. You didn't dare to use any tricks tonight because you were afraid of being discovered. If he used ordinary methods, there would always be traces to follow. The coroner won't just sit around and do nothing. When the time comes, he'll find out that we're the culprits. Besides, there are also people from the Daotong Kenzo. I'm not sure what divine abilities they have. Li Yunxin drained the remaining wine in the pot, drank it in one gulp and stood up. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Lu Laodao felt that his face was glowing with a strange light. Even, it could be considered as demonic. I don't know what divine abilities those people have. Li Yunxin seemed to have thought of something and seemed to be on the verge of laughing. His eyes seemed to be filled with some kind of emotion full of malice, pleasure, but mixed with the impulse to destroy. But they also don't know what divine abilities I have. Let me tell you. My divine ability is called heart-piercing. Lu Laodao didn't really understand what he was talking about. But he understood one thing. He used to think that he had more or less understood this young master's temperament and hobbies. But now he knew. Perhaps what he knew was not even the slightest bit. This young man was not as gentle and easygoing as he looked. Perhaps in his bones, Lu Laodao trembled slightly and forced himself not to look at Li Yunxin at this time. Perhaps there was some kind of terrifying demon hidden in his bones. When the sound of the clapper reached his ears, the night wind blew. Li Yunxin put down his pen and looked at a piece of paper on the table by the moonlight. On it was some information he had sorted out about Governor Li. Lu Laodao didn't know how he could kill Governor Li under the protection of the masters of Daotong and Kenzo without leaving a trace. But to him this matter had opened up some dusty memories of his previous life. Killing people, killing people. Li Yunxin laughed in the dark. He used to like to do this the most. His servant Azay knew that Governor Li was 46 this year. He was slightly fat, suspected to have high blood pressure and fatty liver. He had been an official for generations and his ancestors were second-rank officials. But counting the 4 generations from his father, almost all of them didn't have a good ending. 3 ancestors died of shock. And his father lived for a long time and died of palpitations and asthma. Heart disease. It was probably a family inheritance. Azay said that Governor Li had the style of his father in both appearance and behavior. Then it could be ruled out, the possibility that his surname was Wang. Recently he suddenly didn't like to eat fish. To eat chicken he had to skin it. A few days ago the Sanhika Dragon King temple needed to be repaired. He first reprimanded the people and then allocated the money. The amount was a little more than the request. There was one more thing. 5 or 6 days ago there was a rainstorm. That night lightning flashed and thunder roared. The main hall of the government office collapsed. Then according to Azay, the adults don't like to eat the snacks on weekdays. Today their appetite is a little better, so they asked me to buy some sour soup. Li Yunxin stared at the paper for a while, got up and took the sword Bai Yunxin gave him from the west wall. The sword body glowed softly in the moonlight and he held it and waved it a few times. I hate this feeling the most, he whispered. In the next 2 or 3 days fewer people came to the temple. Li Yunxin walked back and forth in the front yard as usual, but he wasn't just concentrating on attacking his seal. First, the pain brought to him by such a small amount of wish power wasn't enough for him to concentrate on dealing with it. Second, he was trying to find out some things. But people seemed to start to stay away from him and Lu Laodao. He had good ears and eyes. Occasionally, when passers-by saw them and avoided them with a strange look, he heard. Bandits. It is said that they are going to arrest him soon. This kind of thing really surprised him. In his impression, the government in this feudal society should be extremely vicious. If they said to arrest someone, they would tie him up with chains and send him to prison. But he actually heard in the gossip of passers-by that the old servant hasn't confessed yet, the evidence isn't conclusive. He was dumbfounded at that time. The evidence isn't conclusive? In this kind of era, the evidence is conclusive? But when he thought about what happened in Qinghe County, it seemed a little strange. In such a remote county far away from the emperor, Constable Xing as the local tyrant actually made a big fuss and tricked him into escaping from prison. That's why he wanted to kill him. He was also paying attention to something. The evidence is conclusive, right? Chapter 44. If these things made Li Yunxin feel inconceivable, then a word from Qiao Jiaming's mouth that afternoon really surprised him. Lu Laodao was very depressed these days. He probably felt that he had to leave a way out for Li Yunxin, so he ran around with a thick face. But when it came to this kind of thing, the prefectural magistrate personally intervened. Those few friends, who were just acquaintances, were afraid to avoid it and no one paid attention to him. Lao Dao was like a fish on the chopping board. He knew that the knife was going to fall, but he couldn't do anything. In the afternoon, when Qiao Jiaming strolled to the door of the temple with cruel and proud magic, Lao Dao already had a mouth full of blisters. He asked Li Yunxin indirectly how the method was going. Li Yunxin just smiled and sorted out the clues he got today in his mind. At this time he heard a strange laugh. "Oh, I say, you two are still free?" Qiao Jiaming poked his head into the temple door and looked left and right. Seeing that there were no pilgrims at this time, he leaned on the door frame with satisfaction. "If I were you, I wouldn't be so generous. I would have surrendered long ago. Maybe the prefectural magistrate would be soft-hearted and sentence me to exile instead of beheading, then I could live a few more days." Li Yunxin put his hands in his sleeves, walked to him and stood still. He nodded slightly. "Thank you for your concern. Are you here to offer incense? For money or to get rid of disasters?" Qiao Jiaming tilted his head and looked at him, feeling very unhappy. This kid didn't have any fear at all. He changed his face and approached Li Yunxin, saying fiercely, "Don't be silly, kid. Do you think you still have a way to live? Let me tell you, it's me who used money. I want you to die. You and that old thing, neither of you can live." Li Yunxin tilted her face slightly to avoid his saliva. Without the slightest sincerity she said, "Oh, that's right. I'm so scared. But look at you, you're so easily agitated. How did you manage to survive until now? I heard that in the past few years, you swindled people on the streets and caused a lot of illnesses. Why didn't anyone find you to settle the score?" Qiao Jiaming's face darkened and he wanted to curse out loud. But on second thought he was going to die in a few days anyway, so he suppressed his anger and smiled. "Hey, you're worried about me? Back then, Grandpa." Unfortunately, he was still no match for Li Yunxin when it came to arguing. After talking back and forth for nearly half an hour, Qiao Jiaming finally couldn't hold back and wanted to make a move. But when he thought of Li Yunxin's methods last time, he didn't dare to make a move. At this time he regretted coming here. He had a belly full of evil fire, but he couldn't vent it. He had no choice but to spit a few times at the entrance of the temple. He spat until his mouth was dry and his tongue was dry. Only then did he bitterly say to himself, "Just you wait, spit. You're such a high-ranking official, humph. Why do you have to talk about procedural justice? Bah. What the hell is that?" After he left, Lu Laodao looked at Li Yunxin dumbfoundedly. "Brother Xi." It was the first time to see Li Yunxin like this, quarreling with a hooligan. He was really like a young man who didn't have any schemes and was annoyed. But Li Yunxin had calmed down again. He closed his eyes and thought for a while, then smiled at him. Somehow Lu Laodao suddenly felt that from his smile, he saw some cruel meaning. He really didn't know if it was his illusion. In fact, Li Yunxin was reading a word in his mind: procedural justice. How could this word appear in this world? That senior was more interesting than he originally thought. How much did he change the world? Governor Li wanted to make the case an ironclad case of procedural justice. But he probably had a guilty conscience. After releasing the news, he didn't make it public. Li Yunxin even thought that this news was released by the idiot Qiao Jiaming, just to see him and Lu Laodao in a panic these days. Unfortunately, he was disappointed. And in Qiao Jiaming's view, Li Yunxin finally couldn't sit still after holding on for a few rounds that afternoon. That Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao also began to walk the streets and alleys, asking everywhere. Qiao Jiaming asked and learned that the fool was asking about his past. He used to. Well, there were some things that were not right. However, when it came to treating illnesses, it couldn't be said that it could only cure the patient and not kill the patient, right? In any case, he had read some medical books and learned a little bit about it. Treating those poor people who looked down on proper doctors. Well, they might have used the wrong medicine or charged the wrong amount of money. Who hasn't made a mistake at one time or another? Anyway, if you got sick and couldn't see a doctor, you would die. No one had ever heard of a doctor from a medical center who didn't die, right? Did that guy want to use this as an excuse? Bah. Governor Li was determined to get that house, so he wouldn't care about him. And he also heard that this guy went to find someone from Governor Li's mansion. He was a bit smart and knew how to ask for help. But who would care about the few silver coins in his and Lu Laodao's hands? Qiao Jiaming was more and more happy. He even hoped that the day when Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao came to the magistrate's office would be delayed. It would be interesting to see them like headless flies now. Originally they said that they might have met a noble like Yu Meng. But now it seemed that young Master Yu was just interested in them, he had long forgotten them. Just like this, another 3 days passed. That afternoon, in the spacious backyard of the magistrate's office, Governor Li was drinking tea. Governor Li's real name was Li Yaoxi. He was a kind and compassionate person with a broad heart. Li Yaoxi had been an official for more than 20 years, and he always had a reputation of being impartial and strict in the officialdom. The cases that went through his hands were all impeccable. The evidence was conclusive and the process was reasonable. Even if the Iron Judge of Jinghua came, he wouldn't be able to find any fault. In fact, according to his compassionate character, the old servant was already old and he confessed, so he should quickly close the case and give him a quick death so that he wouldn't have to suffer. Who knew that the old servant was a hard nut to crack? Both of his legs had been crippled, but he still didn't want to let go. Ordinarily, it would have been better to free him earlier and make up a statement. But the Iron Judge was going to patrol the city of Wei soon, so he had to be more careful. Thinking of this, he felt annoyed. In fact, he shouldn't be so annoyed. His chest was beating rapidly and he was flustered. Everything he saw made him feel annoyed and anxious, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. His usually quick-witted servant, Aze, was not pleasing to his eyes these days. Speaking of filial piety, he did have it. But these days he always did bad things. A few days ago he said that he found a piece of wood left from the last lightning strike in the yard. He said it was lightning-struck wood, which could ward off evil spirits, and presented it like a treasure. But when he thought of what happened that night, he felt his heart beating rapidly, so he scolded him immediately. In the afternoon he said that he saw the master was annoyed, so he told me some anecdotes, and told him about the Dragon King temple at the mouth of the Sanjiangku, and was scolded again. Later he became timid and aggrieved and stopped talking. But his expression, appearance and walking posture. He reprimanded him again. Something was wrong. Something was wrong, but he just couldn't tell. Li Yaoxi put the teacup in his hand heavily on the table, and felt that it was time to end this case. Maybe because of this case, he always felt uncomfortable. Chapter 45. Magistrate Li made a decision. Being reprimanded by him, Aze felt bad. Once he felt bad, he thought of that young master. In the past few days he became good friends with that young master. That young master Li should be a rich and idle person, and a very gentle and kind one at that. After meeting him that night, he met him again the next day. He thought that the young master would be proud of his identity and not talk to a servant like him. Unexpectedly, the young master greeted him warmly, which made him feel touched for a long time. But talking to this young master Li made him feel really comfortable. It was obviously just a casual chat, just polite words, but when it came from his mouth, it seemed to have a rhythmic charm. It made him feel as if his heart was soaked in warm water. For so many years he had never had this kind of experience. So he opened his heart and told him all his troubles. He told him about his troubles and the trivial things of daily life. What the young master ate, what he drank, what he used today, he told him everything. Forget it, he was embarrassed, saying that he was not talking about these things, that he was not interested. But that young master only smiled warmly and shook his head, saying that between friends, it was not about these trivial things. Being friends. Young Master Li regarded him as a friend. With such feelings, Aze went out of the small door from the backyard, turned into a small alley and saw that young Master Li standing under a willow tree. He held a folding fan in his hand, gently patting it in his palm. The fan and palm made a sound as if knocking on Aze's heart. As he listened, his footsteps unconsciously synchronized with the knocking sound. He didn't even realize it. Recently he had to see each other every day right here under this willow tree, the two of them. Sometimes, there would occasionally be a flash of thought passing through his mind. I feel like I'm possessed. But such a thought was quickly ignored. He would still come to see this young Master Li. How is your young master's condition today? Young Master Li asked him. Still irritated. Aze said, recently the young master is irritated when he sees me. There was some grievance in his words. After feeling wronged for a while, he raised his head. Young master, do you have anything to teach me? Young Master Li Yunshin smiled. He lowered his voice slightly. When you go back today, tell your lord when he's having his meal. Tell him, are you satisfied with the taste? Sometimes, Aze felt that some of young Master Li's words were a bit strange. However, he just couldn't tell what was strange about it. What was even stranger was that he had only said it once and he had already learned it. When he learned to speak to adults, he could not help saying the same thing. But she always thought, young Master Li was such a beautiful man. She sounded like him, so it must be a good thing. At this time, young Master Li tapped his palm with his folding fan and said in a low voice, "Go." Aze turned around as if he was sleepwalking. Satisfied, he walked back with strange steps. Seeing him disappear around the corner, Li Yunxin took a few steps back, leaned against the willow tree and let out a heavy sigh. Very tired. But it was very exciting. Trying to do this for the first time, to hint and guide a person and then through him, to do what he should have done himself, was like controlling a puppet's arm through some kind of remote control, and through the puppet's arm he manipulated another person to complete a meticulously crafted painting. He wanted to try this kind of thing in his previous life, but he never had such a good opportunity. This time, it was the servant who delivered himself to him. And the people of this era, the mental defense was really like a blank piece of paper. They had never experienced such a rich and complicated information bombardment. Even if he was an evil person from the perspective of the field he was proficient in, his mind was as pure as a blank piece of paper. And after these days of thinking, Li Yunxin finally knew what the governor was guarding against. It was said that the magistrate had been struck by lightning on a thunderstorm night. Most of the main hall collapsed and 2 beautiful concubines of the governor died. But the strange thing about this matter was, even if someone was in the main hall, it should be Lord Li. What were the 2 concubines doing in the main hall at night? When he asked Aze, he knew what was strange. It was said that that night in the main hall he heard a voice. It seemed to be a young man laughing. He also said that the rain had stopped and he went to the main hall to see. There was blood. There were embers in the half that had not collapsed. It seemed that someone had made a fire. After that night, Lord Li went to the residences of the Shangqing Danding sect and the Lingshu sword sect in the city of Wei. The masters there had never cared about worldly affairs. But Lord Li persuaded them. Not only did he persuade them, but he also sent someone to have a look and perform a spell. Lord Li, on the other hand, was alive. Everything could be explained now. That person, then that Governor Li, was almost exposed in front of him. In the most recent 5 days it had been a long time. Li Yunxin breathed a sigh of relief and turned to look at the scenery in the distance. The weather was good today, but the willow catkins began to float. His nose was a little itchy. So he waved the folding fan in front of him with one hand behind his back and the other gently fanning and walked along the road. There was a tailor's shop on this road. Lu Laodao was naturally not familiar with these things, and Li Yunxin didn't know much about the materials. It was Miss Yin who picked his eyes. That girl was stubborn. When everyone looked at the 2 people living in the temple with strange eyes, she ran into the door and asked Li Yunxin with a straight face if he had an affair with Miss Qiao. Li Yunxin didn't have the mood to care about her little girl's worries. He just said a few words and left impatiently. Who knew that Miss Yin would feel that she was the one who had hurt Brother Xian's heart with her question. So she became their firm supporter. This was also a good thing. So he left this matter to her to handle. Li Yunxin walked to the door of the shop and Miss Yin was already waiting there. He didn't know if all the girls in the city of Wei were so bold. After these days, Miss Yin was not stingy to express her love for Li Yunxin. Now when she saw Li Yunxin waving the folding fan and walking in the spring breeze, she felt that her heart was about to melt. These past few days her heart had been pounding especially hard. Miss Yin's family was considered well off, so she could read. Since she could read, she liked to read like a man. She didn't read classics and history but only read legends. The love stories of the chivalrous men and young ladies in the legends had long taken root in her heart. Now that she was sure that Brother Xian was wronged and involved in a lawsuit for no reason, and her uncle didn't care, she felt that she had really become the heroine of a legend. When she looked at her brother Xian again, she only felt that the day of separation was getting closer. Maybe it would be like what the legends said. After many years, both of them would have gray hair at the temples before they could hold hands and look into each other's eyes. She felt even sadder. She thought that Brother Xian probably thought the same. That's why he asked her to find a shop to make a greenish-gray inner shirt for him. Not only greenish-gray but also fish scale patterns. She went to so many shops but only found it in this one. Now she was holding the shirt, watching Li Yunxin walking over. Somehow she felt a little sour in her nose and her eyes turned red. Chapter 46. But Miss Yin couldn't cry on the street, so she could only purse her lips and step forward to pass the clothes to Li Yunxin. Brother Exon, the undershirt you wanted is ready. Are you going to go to court in it? Li Yunxin took it and looked at it carefully. Miss Yin was very attentive. It was exactly what he wanted. The gray scale-patterned satin glowed faintly. In the dark room it really did look like scales at first glance. Then he raised his head and said jokingly, "What's wrong? Fluffy, did you get blinded?" Miss Yin reluctantly said, "You know, eldest uncle said he's going to bring you to court in the afternoon." Finally he wiped his eyes, "But fortunately it's a court." "Huh? Is there any other way to go about it?" According to his impression, going to court was to bring people to the yamen, slap the table, shout at them to kneel down and then sign their names. If they didn't, they would be punished. But from what Miss Yin said, it seemed that the court here wasn't very scary. According to the procedure, you'll be summoned for questioning first. This time you'll be questioned politely and won't be punished. But in fact you'll be monitored. When you go back, yamen runners will be sent to keep an eye on you to prevent you from escaping. After 24 hours you'll be summoned again. At that time it won't be a court but a detention. You may be put in jail. So that's what it is. Miss Yin heard Li Yunxin say this in a low voice. Then she found that the face of her young lover actually showed a relaxed and surprised expression, as if he was very happy to know that court was actually like this. But he still had to be detained. She couldn't figure out what Brother Xian was thinking. She only felt that he was pretending to be relaxed for her to see. Her heart hurt even more. She felt that all the sorrows of the world were concentrated on her. Even the sunshine revealed a sense of desolation. Then she turned around and looked into the shop. A man dressed in black walked out. The constables of the Daqing state were all dressed in black, but the constables had a peacock feather on the left side of their official hats. This was a constable. The newcomer's footsteps were fast, but it was a kind of habitual speed. Mustache, fair skin. He was neither fat nor thin and his limbs were long and slender. He looked like a good fighter. The constable stood still beside Miss Yin. He narrowed his eyes and sized up Li Yunxin. He was nearsighted. Miss Yin was about to introduce him to Li Yunxin when the latter smiled and cupped his hands in greeting. "Mr. Yin? You must be Mr. Yin. Miss Yin's uncle?" "Oh." The constable's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. When he first met Li Yunxin, he didn't think that this young man was outstanding except for his beauty and bearing. He was a constable of a mansion, so he had met many more people than his niece. However, he didn't expect the other party to be so calm even after knowing his identity. It was rare. This young man seemed to be quite smart. Things had been going on for so many days, it was impossible for him not to know what was waiting for him. After seeing him, he must have panicked in his heart. However, he did not show it on his face. Instead, he behaved in such a manner. He was also a young man who could achieve great things. As long as he trained a little more, he would be able to overcome the next hurdle. As the most respected person in the Yin family, Yin Pingji actually cared a lot about his niece. He was also one of the rare open-minded people in this era. He didn't have many goals in his career. He understood the principle that the tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. Therefore, he only hoped that his family would be prosperous and stable. It was enough for him to be a well-respected official in the city. Therefore, he who had seen many rich and dissolute sons, didn't intend to let his niece climb up the social ladder. He hoped even more that her husband was a shrewd, sensible man who could do something for the Yin family. He knew that his niece was infatuated with the little Daoist boy in the temple. After hearing all kinds of good things from his niece and knowing the inside story of the case, he understood that this young man and Lao Dao were both innocent. He also often heard his niece praise him. His niece was proud and arrogant, and usually didn't praise people easily. Therefore he was tempted to come and take a look. In his opinion, if a Daoist child was smart and had a decent appearance and he gave him some pointers to help him get through this calamity, then he would definitely be grateful and seek to repay the favor. Now that he saw this young man, he realized that his niece had good taste. He was tempted, but he still had the bearing of an officer and an elder. He only nodded slightly as a return of greeting. He looked at Li Yunxin expressionlessly and walked forward. He said, "I don't deserve to be called a teacher. You can follow me. We'll talk as we walk." Li Yunxin looked at Miss Yin. Seeing her winking at him, he understood what was going on. This girl, she was really infatuated with him. She even asked her uncle to teach him. He smiled faintly at Miss Yin and followed her. He was half a step behind. Yin Pingji smiled in his heart. He put his hands behind his back and said, I've already sent someone to invite Lu Laodao. The prefectural magistrate isn't in a good mood today, so he's planning to go to court today. Do you know why he's in a bad mood? Li Yunxin thought for a moment. Because Meng Ao won't let go? Shuo is right. You're a smart kid. Yin Pingji made a slight smile on his face. He wanted to express his goodwill and praise, but also not make the other party lose their respect for him. Because of Shuo, I'm here to give you some advice. You and I both understand this, so I won't say much. But in this world, you need to know how to take advantage of the situation. You're still young, so you might not understand what I'm saying. But remember, it'll be good for you. As for today, no matter what you think, it's like this. Maybe you feel wronged, but you need to know how to take advantage of the situation. After he finished speaking, he looked at Li Yunxin. He found that the young man was following him step by step, and the expression on his face was still indifferent. He was slightly disappointed. This young man didn't understand? Forget it. He's still a kid after all. He continued, you know that if Meng Ao doesn't let go, officially we'll be in a difficult position. But no matter how difficult it is, he's still the prefectural magistrate and there are ways to do it. The only difference is whether it looks good or not. Since Shuo is interested in you and asked me to come, I'll point you away. When you get to court, admit your crime and push the blame to Laodao. Just say that you were forced. You're still a young man. If you do this well, officially we'll know your intentions. With my mediation, you can also be exempted from punishment. In the future, when you have nowhere to go, come and help me. You're a good young man, but you're learning some mysterious things from Laodao. After he finished speaking, he looked at Li Yunxin and found that the other's face showed a, so that's how it is, expression. He let out a sigh of relief in his heart, telling him this was also for official Li's sake. He completed this task and only missed a young man who would care. Seeing that the young man was tactful, his mood became better. He said, in the future when you work under me, remember what happened today. Take advantage of the situation. Since Shuo likes you and I see that you're a promising person, I'll at least let you live a life of luxury in the future. But you have to remember Shuo's friendship and don't let her down. Otherwise, if I find out, I have many ways. At this point he was interrupted by Li Yunxin. Mr. Yin. He was about to say that there was no need to call him Mr. He was just a martial artist, but he heard the young man say, Mr. Yin, your logic is wrong. To be reasonable, if I push the matter to that old man, my character is definitely not good. Then my character is not good. How can you guarantee that I won't let Miss Yin down in the future? At this time the two had already walked for a while. In front of them, they could faintly see the eaves of the prefectural magistrate against the blue sky. Because they were close to the magistrate's office, there were fewer pedestrians nearby. Li Yunxin stopped and walked to a thick weeping willow. Yin Pingji was surprised by the attitude that he was showing right now, which was completely opposite to what he had expected, and subconsciously stopped with him. He saw that Li Yunxin began to unbutton his outer shirt. As he unbuttoned, he said, Mr. Yin, no matter what, I have to thank you. Whether you really think from Miss Yin's point of view for her sake or because you think that I'm indeed a talent, or even if you stand on the prefectural magistrate Li's side and want to save him some trouble, you can also find some credit for yourself. I understand what you said to me. Then, if it was an ordinary person, they would probably follow your path. He took off his outer shirt, hung it on the willow branch, and began to unbutton his inner shirt. Several passers-by saw the young man undressing on the street and cast curious eyes. But Yin Pingji looked at them with a stern face, and those people hurriedly left. Yin Pingji already felt that something was wrong. He felt that his good intentions just now seemed to have been let down. This young man, it was different from what he thought. What are you doing? He asked with a gloomy face. What do you mean by saying all this? I don't mean anything else. I just want to make my thoughts clear and avoid embarrassment. I don't have any other thoughts about Miss Yin. It's her business that she likes me, but it doesn't mean that if she likes me, I will definitely be a live-in son-in-law or something like that. You actually make things difficult for girls. On the other hand, you see, I am living well in the temple. Suddenly, a person came and told me that you have to move away or he will kill you because I want this temple. I'm not happy about that. If it were someone else, even if they have a way to solve this problem, they would probably first accept your good intentions, say yes, 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 and then continue to do their own things. But I am a person with a strange temper. I'm at Sundra. Li Yunxin had already taken off his inner shirt, leaving only a short shirt on. Only then did he put on the newly made greenish-gray inner shirt with scale patterns, buttoning it up. If I encounter a great monster, I can't do anything. I will immediately become a coward and pretend to be a coward to survive. But when it comes to other things, I feel that maybe I can solve it. If I continue to pretend to be a coward, I won't be happy. For example, today if I nod and say yes, I will feel uncomfortable. Then I don't want to do it. Under Yin Pingji's increasingly gloomy gaze, he put on his outer shirt again, looked at him and said, "So Mr. Yin, I don't want to do it. Lu Laodao is a good person and he didn't collude with any bandits. That's all I can say." Yin Pingji stared at him for a while, then suddenly sneered, "Do you think I don't know who you are? Maybe I can solve it?" You, Li Yunxin, formerly known as Li Xiao, are from the Yi nation. Both your parents are dead. Since the age of 7 you have been a Daoist apprentice and know a few tricks. I've already sent people to investigate you. Do you think that with your little tricks you can maybe solve this matter? Yin Pingji snorted coldly. Do you not understand the situation? The masters of Daotong and Kenzo have already set up restrictions in the magistrate's office. Not to mention you, even those crooked masters of yours won't be able to do anything once they enter the magistrate's office. I've tried to persuade you but you won't listen. Xueruo, do you really think that I want her to marry you? If I want to see, what can you, a kid who doesn't know how to appreciate favors, do? Li Yunxin was stunned. Li Xiao. Yi nation? What the hell? He could understand if he went to investigate himself. But with such a result as a public official, the other party was so sure. What was going on? But in Yin Pingji's eyes, his stupor was the stupor of having his identity exposed. He sneered again, deliberately mystifying. Did Xueruo make these clothes for you? I don't know what you're planning, but this time you've entered the magistrate's office, don't think of coming out again. Leave this undershirt for the grave. Go. Li Yunxin didn't say a word, in front of him as if he was being escorted away. Right now he wasn't in the mood to care about other things, he was only thinking, what's going on with that identity? Someone is helping me. Who? But after thinking for a while he temporarily put this thought aside. No matter what, he had to figure out what to do next. After a quarter of an hour he turned into the street of the magistrate's office. In the daytime the sun was shining brightly. The faceless ghosts were a little dispirited but they were still there. He passed through them without any reaction. It was as if he didn't exist. Li Yunxin wasn't sure if it was because his spirit was special. That night when the 9th young master looked at his fortune, he said he was interesting, while Bai Yunxin said he was fragrant. Most likely, it was because of his unique identity. But he did feel the prohibition. It was set up by Daotong and Kenzo disciples, and it cost almost all of Prefectural Magistrate Li's property. Comparing the prohibition in his body to the one here, it was like comparing a small sampan to an aircraft carrier. Yin Pingji was a layman, so he didn't understand. He only heard that when the masters cast spells, evil spirits couldn't cast spells. That was right. But today he didn't come to show off any spells. He came to show off his skills. Chapter 47. It was the first time for Li Yunxin to enter the magistrate's office. Fortunately, this magistrate's office did look like a magistrate's office, and there were no accidents that surprised him. Stepping into the high threshold he saw the front yard. The terrazzo tiles covered the ground without a trace of dust. When he looked up he could see the main hall with the open door. With his good eyesight he had already seen the magistrate sitting behind the platform. In the main hall 2 rows of bailiffs were holding water and fire rods, squinting at the door. Lu Laodao had arrived. Perhaps it was because he felt guilty when he sent someone to invite him. He panicked and wanted to run away, so his outer robe was torn. Right now he was covering the tear with one hand, looking like Shizi holding the heart. But his face was sad and distressed. He lowered his head and secretly glanced at the 2 people next to the magistrate. There were 2 Daoists next to the magistrate. One looked like he was in his 40s, which meant he might be in his 60s. because cultivators were supposed to look younger than ordinary people. This person was wearing a Daoist robe which was made of white satin, and he held a horsetail whisk in his hand. The other person seemed to be in his early 20s, wearing a coarse Daoist robe, and his hand was empty. This Daoist robe? Li Yunxin found it familiar. It was the kind of Daoist robe worn by Qi Songzi, Kong Kanzi and Huainanzi. This person was a swordsman of the Ling Su sword sect. Then the one holding the horsetail whisk was the Daoist of the Xianxia Danding sect. Magistrate Li was scared out of his wits. Li Yunxin had heard about these two people from Aze. The Daoist of the Xianxia Danding sect was called Tsong Yunzi. The Daoist of the Ling Su sword sect was called Pun Nanzi. The two people guarded Li Yaoxi for 4 hours a day, and the fee was 100 taels. That was a net profit of 100,000 yuan per hour. After glancing at these important people, he looked at the plaintiff opposite Lu Laodao. Oh, the victim here. The Qiaos stood by the door, and so did Qiao Jiaming. The three people whispered to each other, and no one knew what they were talking about. Seeing Li Yunxin come in, Qiao Jiaming gave him a vicious look, pointed at him, and then wiped his neck with his index finger. Crazy. Once he was done, Yin Pingji took a step forward and said in a low voice, "Once you enter the yamen, it will be hard to get out. Think carefully about what you're going to say after seeing this. Don't be stupid." Then he strode through the crowd and walked to the door of the hall. He bowed to Governor Li and said loudly, "Sir, the suspect is here." Li Yaoxi frowned slightly and carefully looked at the people at the door. He sighed imperceptibly and said, "Bring them in." The lecture hall opened. "Those outside, guard the door well. You are allowed to listen, watch, and not make any noise. Otherwise you will be fined 1 silver tael per person." Li Yunxin was slightly stunned. He turned his head and looked outside the gate. It was just like what was shown in the TV series. A group of people had gathered outside and were looking around. His sharp eyes saw that Miss Yin was also among them, but he couldn't see her expression clearly. The governor gave the order and everyone quieted down. He didn't know the rules, but he knew to follow. The three people of the Qiao family crossed the threshold and entered the door with a relaxed look. He also walked to Lu Laodao, pulled his sleeve and motioned him to follow in. Laodao just realized that Li Yunxin had come. He hurriedly lowered his voice and said with a crying tone, "Brother X, and what should we do? Look at that." He glanced at the two cultivators beside Governor Li. Li Yunxin knew what he wanted to say. 2 cultivators of the Xianmen sect were present. Who dared to kill people? The old Taoist only knew that he had been preparing for the past few days, but he really did not know how the unfathomable master in his heart was preparing. As far as he was concerned, all the bizarre possibilities he could think of, Brother Xen probably couldn't do anything this time. If he had known, he would have escaped. Li Yunxin just smiled at him. Governor Li saw them whispering to each other, but he didn't care. In fact, when he saw this situation, even if it was just a questioning, he would hit the gavel and ask them to be quiet. But today it was really boring. As it was boring. But this kind of boring was not the kind of boring that he didn't care about everything. But it was boring to be annoyed. Everything he looked at was annoying, and everything he looked at made him shudder. He felt dazzled when he looked at the sunlight on the terrazzo floor outside the hall. The ground was so bright that it made him dizzy. He quickly turned his gaze. When he turned his gaze, it was dark in front of him. The hall was shady. But when he saw the dark corner in the hall, he suddenly felt a palpitation and inexplicably scared. He really didn't know what he was afraid of. Seeing the silk padded under the official seal, he was also annoyed. He still didn't know what he was annoyed about. He always felt that something was wrong. Always felt that there was something wrong. He was eager to find out what was wrong and solve it, but he couldn't catch it. He couldn't catch a certain point or a certain line. He thought it was the recent case that made him annoyed, but now that all the people were here, he became even more annoyed. The old and the young were whispering to each other. They should scold him. But looking at the young man, he didn't know why he felt annoyed. The way he walked was annoying, the way he opened and closed his mouth was annoying, and the way he moved was like, what the hell, why was he like Aze? He was annoyed by Aze these few days. But when he thought of Aze, he felt that he seemed to have forgotten something. In the past few days he had forgotten something very important. Hey, so annoying. Li Yaoxi grabbed the gavel and smashed it on the table. The strength was so strong that it even made his fingers hurt. Silence. Silence. He didn't even notice that his butt had left the chair. He stood up. Song Yunzi and Pan Nanzi frowned slightly and exchanged glances. Li Yaoxi was not right today. What was going on? Lao Dao. Song Yunzi flicked his horsetail whisk, made a sign, closed his eyes for a while and opened them again. There was nothing unusual. The Yin spirit formation set up by the two of them might not be able to trap a powerful cultivator, but it should be able to sense it. In this government office, except for the two of them, no one else used spiritual power. Then, they didn't need to worry about it. If Li Yaoxi had other troubles, it was not within the scope of the two of them. Thus, the two of them lightly glanced at the people in the hall. Their eyes paused on Lu Laodao for a while and then they closed their eyes again. When the magistrate shouted, almost everyone trembled in fear. After shouting, Li Yaoxi felt his heart was beating fast, and the depression in his heart seemed to have been vented a little. He continued, "The two in the hall, what are their names?" "Then this little one, you go first." He stretched out his hand like a drunk person and pointed at Li Yunxin. "It's you. What are you called?" Seeing the governor's imposing manner, Qiao Jiaming viciously laughed. The governor was furious. It was no wonder that Meng Ao, that old man, refused to give in these days and insisted on making Li Yunxin anxious. Now he vented all his anger on this kid. He was close to Li Yunxin and he sneered and whispered, "In a while you will suffer." Li Yunxin didn't look at him and cupped his hands. "Go back to the hall. This commoner Li Yunxin." His voice was pleasant and clear. But his tone was a little strange and the word yun was a little long, as if he was acting with a little more laziness. When the governor heard his name, his face twitched as if he had swallowed a fly. Then the three people of the Qiao family felt even more delighted. They hated him to the extreme. What happened next confirmed their conjecture. Li Yaoxi frowned again, grabbed the pot full of sticks on the table and threw it at Li Yunxin's head. "I'll call you Li Yunxin." Unfortunately, his aim was not good and it was smashed askew. The sticks scattered on the ground and the pot smashed on the door frame of the main hall, rolled over and stopped at Qiao Jiaming's feet. It was the first time that they saw the governor so angry, which was shameful. Even Yin Pingji felt something was wrong and hurriedly said, calm down. But he didn't know how to comfort him. At this time Lu Laodao had been trembling with fear and his knees were weak. Then he stepped forward, cupped his fists and half knelt on the ground. Li Yaoxi's violent interrogation was interrupted by his voice, and he frowned and looked at him. But when he saw Li Yunxin half kneeling, he seemed to be stunned. His expression was frozen on his face, his mouth was slightly open, and his eyelids were blinking quickly, but he couldn't speak. The two cultivators closest to him once again noticed his abnormality. This time it was Pan Nanzi who frowned and formed a seal. But he still did not find anything. Then it was still this person's own problem. Pan Nanzi shook his head. This idiot. As a dignified fifth-rank official, he ended up like this because of a case. However, it was fine as long as it wasn't a problem of evil magic. With the two of them keeping watch, how could a healthy man in his prime be in danger? Seemed like he was overthinking things. Thus he closed his eyes again. She heard Li Yunxin say, "That night, this commoner and my master spent the night with the people from the escort agency. We got along very well. This commoner still remembers that escort Qiao had baked a cake by the fire and asked Miss Qiao, 'Are you satisfied with the taste?' Then Pan Nanzi heard a suppressed and painful moan. It was Li Yaoxi's moaning. He suddenly opened his eyes and found that Li Yaoxi had sat back down on the official chair. Then he widened his eyes and stared at the sky, as if he had seen something incomparably terrifying. His throat was gurgling, his face suddenly turned red, and his hands were waving wildly in front of him as if he was trying to dispel something. The two cultivators' eyes lit up at the same time. "The demon is here." With a low grunt, they formed a hand sign together. However, there was nothing. There was still nothing. When the two of them looked at Li Yaoxi in surprise and confusion, the latter's eyes were wide open and he was dead on the chair. There was a deathly silence that lasted for a breath of time. Panicked shouts suddenly broke out in the court. Yin Pingji pulled out the knife from his waist and stood in front of Li Yaoxi's body. He stared at the sky in horror. The bailiffs on both sides were quick to react. They had already yelled and rushed to move Lordly to check his breathing. The slower ones held the water and fire sticks in their hands and looked around, but they didn't know what had happened. What happened? Li Yaoxi, a dignified fifth-rank official, died in this bright, well-surrounded room with 2 cultivators. He died suddenly. The 3 people of the Qiao family were also stunned. But their next reaction, they went to see Li Yunxin. They looked at Li Yunxin as if they had seen a ghost. Then they saw the young man calmly stand up from the ground, turn his head and smile at them, revealing his white and neat teeth. "I kill in front of you." Then he stretched out his hand, pointed at the 3 people in turn and said happily, "You 3, none of you can escape." Against such a horrified atmosphere and seeing the smile on his face, they didn't know why the 3 people felt that this smile was so cruel and evil. Mrs. Qiao finally couldn't help but let out a shrill scream, flew back a few steps and pointed at Li Yunxin. "Ah, it's him. He's using magic. He killed the prefectural magistrate." The shrill female voice made people's ears hurt, and it didn't seem like it was going to stop. The Kenzo cultivator Pun Nenzi was annoyed. He looked at the young man she was pointing at and suddenly waved his hand. Mrs. Qiao's body was like a doll as she slammed into the wall, leaving a bloody mark and no longer moving. How could he not be annoyed? How could he not be annoyed? The dignified cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo. 2 people. Guarding the prefectural magistrate. Setting up the great evil spirit formation. But now that monster killed someone in front of their eyes. They didn't know anything and they didn't know what to do. And they had to listen to that stupid woman point at Immortal and say that he killed someone. That was a great humiliation. In that stupid woman's mind, cultivators like her, cultivators who trained hard, couldn't even see through a child's magic? What? The cultivators knew that it was impossible for someone to cast a spell in this formation without being noticed. Just like how mortals knew that it was impossible for the sky to become the earth, and the earth to become the sky. But Yin Pingji also heard Mrs. Qiao's words. These words were like a clap of thunder that struck his heart. He looked at Li Yunxin in disbelief and remembered the words that the young man said to him under the willow tree an hour ago. Maybe it can be solved. He sucked in a breath of cold air and looked straight at Li Yunxin's face. And the young man had already supported Lu Laodao and was leaning against the wall like many people in the hall who were panicking. The young man was also looking at him. There was a malicious and mocking smile on his face. He looked at him and then slightly spread out his hands. It seemed like he was saying, "What can you do?" Yin Jiping moved his eyes away with difficulty and looked at Qiao Jiaming, Madame Qiao, who were too scared to make a sound and curled up on the ground, and Madame Qiao's corpse, which was oozing more and more blood. He seemed to get an electric shock and forced himself to look away. He didn't dare to look at Li Yunxin anymore. He couldn't. If he wanted to live, he couldn't say it. Even the 2 so-called masters didn't notice it. Look at what happened to Mrs. Qiao. It was not until this time that Lu Laodao held Li Yunxin's arm tightly and asked him with trembling lips, "Brother Exin, what on earth is going on?" Yin Pingji didn't know what the killing tribulation was, but he knew that someone would probably die. They also knew that this immortal master didn't care whether they were vermin or not, or whether the people in the hall were innocent. He was just angry. But this anger came at the right time. He hurriedly glared and waved his hand. "Didn't you hear what the immortal master said? Disperse everyone for me. Disperse. Hurry up and carry them away. Don't delay Master Immortal's work." The Yamen runners were confused from beginning to end. Whether in the eyes of the arrestor or the immortal master, they were all insignificant people, so they just obeyed orders. Even if they didn't know what had happened, they still had to obey. At this moment, some people ran outside the Yamen to disperse the onlookers. Some went to carry Madame Qiao's body and some went to take people away. But Yin Pingji personally went to take Li Yunxin away. When the arrestor walked to Li Yunxin in a panic, Qiao Jiaming and Madame Qiao had been pushed away by the Yamen runners, because they didn't dare to shout anymore and were scared out of their wits. Li Yunxin's expression and words were still vivid in his mind. "None of you can escape." He wanted to beg for mercy, but he was driven out by the Yamen runners. He staggered away and looked back at Li Yunxin, almost crying. Yin Pingji pursed his lips tightly and walked to Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao. His back was not as straight as before, but his shoulders were slightly slumped and his neck was slightly leaning forward. Probably even he didn't realize that this was the state he had always been in when he met a superior. He thought for a while and didn't know how to address Li Yunxin at this time. Seeing the faint smile on Li Yunxin's face, he could only say in a hoarse voice, "You two please. Follow me out of the yamen." A yamen runner heard his words and looked at him in surprise. But at this time, Yin Pingji was not in the mood to care about what others thought of him. Li Yunxin looked at him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He pulled Lu Laodao and said, "Inspector Yin has spoken. Master, let's go." Laodao knew how to read the situation. He knew that at this time in front of these two people he had to be obedient. So without saying a word he followed beside Li Yunxin, full of the great fortune and gratitude of the Daqing state after surviving a disaster. After leaving the main hall, Li Yunxin glanced at Yin Pingji, who was carefully observing his expression. He smiled and said, "Well, don't guess. I killed them. But even if you tell them calmly later, they won't believe you. Instead, you'll be out of luck. They'll think that you're laughing at them. Just like Madame Qiao. You know, that kind of person is always very confident in himself. It's very difficult for him to accept things that are beyond his knowledge." Li Yunxin shrugged. "He's stubborn. In fact, it's similar to your previous state. I said that there might be a way, but you didn't believe me." Yin Pingji's heart jumped with his words and he hurriedly said, It's me. You want to admit your mistake and apologize to me. But you don't know whether I really did it or I'm just pretending." The three people had walked to the outside of the yamen and left the sight of the two practitioners in the hall. Li Yunxin stopped and turned to look at Yin Pingji. "I understand. After all, you've been a constable for so many years. No matter at home or in the workplace, you've been flattered. It's also difficult for you to accept things that are beyond your knowledge. If you can't make up your mind, I can open your eyes again." Li Yunxin tilted his head and looked at Qiao Jiaming and Madame Qiao, who were guarding a weeping willow not far away. He pointed to them and said, "Those two people were frightened by what happened just now. I also told them that they would die too. Now I'm telling you. In a while you help me stop those two people. Don't let them come over to bother me and don't let them plead with me. Tell both of them they're dead. You see, this is a chance for you to confirm your guess. You can observe and see if you can find some evidence to say that I did it." Chapter 49. Of course, you can also risk your life to talk to the two Taoist priests and observe with them. But only if you're not afraid of death. It's easy for me to kill someone. You're the same. By the way, my master has a friend called Mengao. He's in jail. Whatever you do, this man must be set free without a scratch. You can hesitate and be unsure if you want to release him or not. That's okay, at least the guarantor is still alive. You can release him after the two Taoist priests die. But for your own sake, you better pray that he doesn't die in jail. Otherwise you'll be done for." After Li Yunxin said this, Yin Pingji was stunned. Then he shouted to a runner not far away, "Bring the two Qiaos to the back, I'll interrogate them later." Then without another word he turned around and ran, towards the direction of the prison. Li Yunxin turned to Lu Laodao and said, "Let's go. I'm hungry. I heard that the main branch of Munenju is over there, let's go have a look. Then I'll tell you about it." Looks like I'm not used to acting cool. If I don't tell someone, I won't know. An hour later, the two were sitting in Munenju on Willow Street. It was a private room on the second floor facing the street. The window was open and they could see the bright sunshine, but they didn't feel too hot. There was an old willow tree next to the window, and the green silk strands blocked the direct sunlight. They could see people on the street from the window. This was probably one of the busiest streets in Weiqing, with people coming and going. It couldn't be compared to the pedestrian streets of the future, but it was not much worse. Li Yunxin poured a glass of wine for Laodao. "Drink it. Calm down. When we get home, I'll buy a whip and let people know that I'm innocent." Laodao took the cup with trembling hands and drank it all in one breath. He took a deep breath and shook his head. "Brother Exon, did you really kill the prefectural magistrate?" Laodao loved to drink, but he couldn't hold his liquor well, so he still used a medium cup. After drinking this cup of Munan Chun, he felt much more relaxed and was not as scared as before. Carefully he asked another question, "But how did you kill him?" Li Yunxin twirled the wine cup in his hand. He stared blankly for a while before a smile appeared on his lips. "This is actually also an experiment. Experiment. Yeah, it's a test. Li Yunxin took a sip of wine. There's no need to make things so big. There are many ways to settle this. For example, it's not like I can't get money. If they want money, I can spend some effort to get it and give it to them. Then we can negotiate. Or I can do something to the Joneses to make them stop. But first, I'm not happy. You have to know that it's not easy to live. Being happy is the most important thing. My biggest taboo is to make myself suffer when there is a way to solve the problem. Second, it's for this experiment. I've never tried to kill people like this before. After the experiment is done, I have other things to solve. As he spoke, his voice gradually became lower. It was hard for Lu Laodao to listen attentively. Li Yunxin suddenly raised his head and drank all the wine. He slammed the table and said, "All right, I'll tell you. You have to know a concept first. I say, old Lu, do you know what consciousness is?" Lu Laodao immediately sat up straight and shook his head solemnly. His face became slightly excited. Li Yunxin knew that he thought that she was going to give him a lecture. But he only smiled and continued, "Consciousness is a person's thoughts. This is easy to understand. People like you probably don't know about consciousness or subconsciousness. Then listen to me slowly. Consciousness, you are thinking about what I said. You hear footsteps outside and you know that it might be the waiter coming to serve the dishes. These thoughts, the thoughts that you can perceive yourself, are all consciousness. But old Lu, why do you think that the waiter is coming to serve the dishes when you hear the footsteps? If you think about it carefully, it's because you know that this is Southern Wood Jew. You know that we ordered the dishes. After ordering the dishes after a long time, someone came and the dishes should be served. But the process from hearing the footsteps to the waiter is coming to serve the dishes was omitted by your consciousness. These omitted thoughts, you may think of them as your subconscious, your hidden consciousness. Another example is when you practice calligraphy and swordsmanship. When you first learn a word, you need to think about the next stroke and where to write it. When you first practice swordsmanship, you need to think about the next move. But as time passes and you become proficient, you won't think about how to write and you won't think about how to move. The subconsciousness completes the process for you. They exist, but you can't perceive them. Of course, what I said is the most direct and simplest example. It might not be that accurate. But you need to understand. Do you understand? Put the dishes here. And a pot of wine. Hurry and order the other dishes. It was Lao Dao's first time coming into contact with these concepts. He was a little surprised, very surprised that Brother Xian was talking about these and not the Tao of Immortals. But it was also the first time he thought about these issues. He was also surprised that Brother Xian had studied so thoroughly. He didn't know what Li Yunxin's intention was, but he still listened carefully. After pondering for a while, Li Yunxin drank another cup of wine and ate a few mouthfuls of food. He nodded. "Brother Xian, I think I understand. Then I'll continue. You must have never seen an iceberg. Not many people in the Daqing state have seen one. An iceberg is a huge piece of ice as big as a mountain floating in the sea. But in fact, what's above the water surface is only about 1/10 of the whole piece of ice. The rest, more hidden under the water surface, you can't see it. A person's consciousness and subconsciousness are almost like this. What you can perceive is only a very small part. Most of the things you hear and see every day, the things you think about, the things you think you don't care about, are still in your subconsciousness. For example, one day before, if you saw the waiter who just came in to serve the dishes, but later forgot about him. Later, when you see him again, you think, oh, this person looks a little familiar. You think and think, but you can't remember. At this time I tell you, hey, this waiter, isn't he the one who often wandered around our house and stalked us? And when I reminded you, you said, oh yes. You remember? The part of your consciousness that floated out from under the water surface was accepted by you. Then that sentence I said was a hint to you. Not only can a sentence become a hint, but also a kind of light, an object, or even the movement of the curtain in our private room when the wind blows, can become a hint. Chapter 50. Another example is when you write a word or recite a paragraph from a book. You pick up the pen and forget how to recite the word. This is because the memory has been hidden. At this time I write a stroke for you to see and mention the first sentence to you. You immediately say, oh, I know. This is me guiding out the consciousness that you have hidden. Another example is that there is a sad thing in the past. You slowly forget it, don't think about it, and hide it in your heart. One day when you are in high spirits, I suddenly mention that thing to you. You remember it and your mood instantly changes from joy to sadness. This is what I meant. With one sentence, I've guided out the things hidden in your heart. With just one sentence, I've changed your emotions. Do you understand the relationship between consciousness and subconsciousness? Lu Laodao had gradually become interested. Every word of Li Yunxin was a door to a new world for him. At this time he didn't think about why Li Yunxin said these and how he killed prefectural magistrate Li. He only focused on understanding his words. He nodded. I understand a little. Then let's talk about Li Yaoxi. Li Yunxin suddenly changed the topic. He looked at the table, put down the chopsticks, and reached out to tear a drumstick from the whole roasted chicken that emitted a charming fragrance. That night, a big demon came to his house. It was the thunderstorm 10 days ago and the main hall was destroyed. Ah! Lao Dao was lost in thought. At this time he was surprised when he heard big demon. I don't think you have seen a big demon before. You may not even have seen a demon. But I am familiar with it. Li Yunxin looked at the drumstick and bit it hard. He also watched the golden chicken skin being pulled and torn by his teeth. I have seen that demon. Why do I know this matter? In fact, I can infer from many details. He met Aze. He was a master of playing with people's hearts, so he easily gained the trust of the other party. With a little hint and guidance he knew a lot of details of that night. The thunderstorm, the young man's laughter. There were young men in the Li mansion, but it was not anyone in the mansion who laughed unbridledly at night. It was an outsider. When Li Yunxin was being hunted in the ruined temple, it was also a stormy day. She had also heard a man laugh. The sound was very pleasant. Aze said that the next day he saw the embers of a bonfire in the other half of the house that hadn't collapsed. On the night Li Yunxin was in the rundown temple, the great fiendish demon, the 9th young master, had lit a bonfire and roasted a human. Constable Xing's wife and son were eaten during a thunderstorm as well. Because of these clues he suspected that it was the 9th young master. Then he used a lot of effort to hypnotize Aze. It gave him a lot of abilities and instincts that he didn't know about before. He got more information from Li Yaoxi. Actually, this wasn't a difficult task. A hypnotized Aze wouldn't be able to break through a metal plate with his bare hands. He was still himself, but he would pay attention to more things. For example, every smile of Li Yunxin's, every wrinkle on his face, every rise and fall of his tone, would be faithfully recorded by him and then passed on to Li Yunxin. He felt that every time he chatted with young Master Li, but in fact, every time he chatted, he brought back a lot of information. Finally, Li Yunxin figured out the ins and outs of the matter. That night it was indeed the 9th young master. That night the 9th young master passed through the city of Wei. He fell from the sky along with the thunderstorm. He was hungry and wanted to eat supper. Li Yaoxi was in the main hall that night. He didn't want to die. Coincidentally, the 9th young master hated him, so he called his 2 beautiful concubines to come. They were sent to the 9th young master to be killed and roasted over a bonfire. After the 9th young master left, the fear in the governor's heart, as it was the first time he encountered a man-eating demon. Thus he spent all his wealth to hire 2 cultivators to protect him. I borrowed Zay's mouth to let him temporarily forget about meeting the 9th young master. Li Yunxin threw the chicken thigh bone on the table, picked up a handkerchief from the copper basin filled with warm water and wiped his hands. Such a big thing. How could he forget? Lu Laodao couldn't help shouting. Why not? Li Yunxin looked at him with a smile. Some people can even forget to eat when they are busy. They can even burn their hands with cigarettes. Why can't they forget other things? Or when they are guided or hinted at? For example, the waiter who delivered the food to us was indeed the one who had been monitoring our house for the past few days. He was Yin Pingji's underling. He came in a few times just now and you already felt that he looked familiar. Now he is aiming at you with a crossbow outside the door curtain. Speaking of this, a breeze blew and the door curtain moved. Li Yunxin used his finger to knock on the table. There was a loud thud. Lu Laodao's eyes instantly widened. He jumped up from the stool and stared at the wall by the window. But after 2 or 3 seconds he came back to his senses, looked at the door curtain in disbelief and then looked at Li Yunxin. Sit down. It's okay. Li Yunxin smiled and waved his hand. What did you see just now? But Lu Laodao still walked 2 steps quickly, carefully lifted the door curtain and then sat back at the table. His face was full of disbelief and great admiration. Brother Xu. Just now. I saw the waiter rush in from behind the curtain and shot an arrow at me. It was over there. It missed and it nailed the side of the window. Yes. Li Yunxin looked at him. Previously, you were wondering how I killed Li Yaoxi, and your heart was filled with great curiosity. What I said was new to you and you trusted me. So, you listened attentively and completely followed my thoughts. And when I was telling you, I used familiar people seen before and the waiter as examples. Old Lu, this was the process of me guiding and hinting at you. Through my tone and posture, I repeatedly deepened the impression of these things in your mind. When I had deepened it enough, you drank some wine. So, when your mind was at its most scattered, I told you what I said just now. At this time, the boundary between your conscious and subconscious was already very blurry. So, for the last time I knocked on the table. This knock was the last straw. Because it was very much like the sound of an arrow nailing on wood, your mind quickly connected the surging subconscious together, and restored the non-existent reality. You had an illusion. You saw what you saw just now. But, you are in good health so it doesn't matter. You see, this is how it came about. As for that Li Yaoxi, Li Yunxin did not give Lu Laodao a chance to exclaim and continued, I made him temporarily forget what happened that night. So when the main hall was repaired he would still interrogate us in the main hall. But although he forgot, I still spent a few days through Aze constantly hinting and guiding him. I asked Aze to give him thunderbolt wood, saying that it could ward off evil. In fact, I was hinting at the thunderstorm that night, deepening the fear in his subconscious. I gave him fish, reminding him of the demon ninth young master, and also deepening the fear in his subconscious. I also said that the Dragon King Temple, the river and the rain deepened his fear. I made him be constantly guided and hinted at by me, just for the day when I went to court. These days he was already very irritated. When he went to court and saw me, I used my tone and movements to match Aze's behavior a few days ago to complete the final guidance. At that time, because of anxiety and pressure, he was like you before, at the critical point where his consciousness and subconscious were mixed up. So I said that sentence. I asked Aze to ask him when he was eating, is the taste satisfactory? Then I told him in court. Lu Laodao could not help but continue. You said, you heard that escort Qiao at the bonfire. Yes, the bonfire. He asked Miss Qiao if the taste was satisfactory. Yes. Li Yunxin smiled. The bonfire and the taste. When that demon ate people, it was very likely that he mentioned how it tasted. This was the sentence I used to detonate him. At the same time, to be safe, I also wore this inner shirt. Green-gray, fish scale pattern. The outer shirt was a white robe, to ensure that he remembered what happened that night again. Then, as expected, he remembered. The fear that had been suppressed for so many days, and the fear that was constantly strengthened by me, suddenly rushed into his consciousness. Everything rushed into his mind. Just like you just now, he saw the truth created by his subconscious. He probably saw that there was another cloud in the sky, lightning and thunder. That great demon rushed down towards him. It was a fear of life and death. But it was not the last time. This time the fear was 10 times stronger, 100 times stronger. So, his mentality exploded. This guy, he had high blood pressure, fatty liver. His ancestors all died of palpitations. There was also a family hereditary heart disease. Aze had long told me that Li Yaoxi's heart would occasionally hurt. So, old Lu, you were not afraid just now. You were healthy, so you ignored it. This Li Yaoxi had to die. Even in, any era, if an autopsy was done, it would still be a sudden heart attack. It has nothing to do with me. You asked me how I did it. That's how I did it. Li Yunxin smiled warmly, enough to understand a person. Then, his life and death were in my hands. Chapter 51. After saying that, Li Yunxin poured himself another glass of wine and took a sip. The wine was the Munan Chun that Lao Dao usually couldn't bear to drink. Even someone like Li Yunxin, who wasn't good at wine, could taste the aroma of fresh grass and fruits. The dishes were almost cold. But fortunately, the two of them ordered mostly cold dishes. They couldn't miss the crispy peanuts, beef with soy sauce and stir-fried pork hibiscus. He picked up the chopsticks and ate slowly, leaving Lao Dao in a daze. Li Yunxin opened the door to a new world for him. Lao Dao wasn't a cultivator with profound cultivation. Even before he met Li Yunxin, he wasn't a real cultivator. He would be classified as a secular person by Daoist priests and swordsmen. But he still knew some things, so he could see the big picture. So he could understand why the two cultivators in the hall didn't suspect them at all. That was because the technique Li Yunxin used was something that no one in this world had ever studied deeply. Just like in Li Yunxin's era, a person suddenly died. At that time, another person ran to the police officers and said it was a monster who did it. No one would pay attention to him. They just frowned and pushed that person aside, continuing to think, what kind of method did the criminal use? And it was precisely because cultivators had practically grasped all of this world's unimaginable methods that they didn't believe that there existed even more mysterious methods beyond their knowledge. It wasn't even arrogant or stubborn. It was just beyond their knowledge. Lao Dao looked straight at Li Yunxin. The young man was very handsome, with red lips and white teeth, sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was a real handsome man. The warm sunshine of the spring day reflected the layer of fine hair on his face and neck clearly. Because he was young, his skin was tight, not loose and not wrinkled. His expression was always gentle. Even when he was about to kill, he was gentle and smiling. But at this moment, when Lao Dao looked at such a young man sitting in the sunshine, he only felt a chill on his back. Because she remembered what he said before. There's no need to go through so much trouble. I just want to do an experiment. Brother X and he, just for an experiment, he killed someone. He had killed a 5th-rank official of the imperial court, and there were 2 cultivators on the side. There was a sentence that Lao Dao only dared to say in his heart. This was a thought that suddenly appeared in his mind, one that even surprised him. He was a demonic human. A human demon who played with people's hearts. As if he knew Lao Dao's thoughts, Li Yunxin met his gaze. Lao Dao turned his face away as if he had been electrocuted and stroked his beard. Old Lu, don't be afraid. Li Yunxin looked at him, then looked out the window. I'm actually very easy to talk to. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. And you really are a good person. I quite like nice people. You're a smart person and I like smart people too. He put down his chopsticks and stood up. He walked over to the window and looked out. But I hate idiots the most, he said to himself. Stupidity is the original sin. They all deserve to die. These 3 sentences were tinged with coldness and hatred. Lao Dao had never heard such intense hatred in a person's words before. He didn't know where Li Yunxin, who looked to be only 14 or 15 years old, could have such rich emotions, seasoned tactics and mature wisdom. He couldn't help but think of that phrase again. A demonic human who played with people's hearts. An inner demon. At this time, Li Yunxin turned around and looked at him. Come on. It looks like you're not in the mood to eat either. Tell the waiter to pack it up. Send it to our mansion. Don't pay the bill, there's someone waiting downstairs. Let's go buy a hanging whip. I want one with 200 rings. As the 2 went downstairs, Lao Dao finally knew who Li Yunxin was referring to. Yin Pingji was sitting downstairs with a cup of tea in front of him. The innkeeper was also sitting next to him, chatting with him. Lao Dao was a little perturbed. He didn't know why Inspector Yin came. Was it because he felt something was wrong and couldn't believe it, so he came to find them? But his worries disappeared without a trace when he saw the look on Yin Pingji's face. Originally, Constable Yin was trying to remain calm and was chatting with the innkeeper. But when he saw the 2 coming down from the wooden stairs, he stood up immediately. It looked like a superior who had been waiting for a long time finally came. Seeing him like this, the innkeeper thought there was a big shot in disguise upstairs, so he also stood up in surprise and turned around. But he only saw a young man in Lao Dao. So he was even more surprised. He knew what kind of person Yin Pingji was. The big shots in the city of Wei could be counted. The 4 magistrates of the prefecture. The magistrate in charge of the city of Wei, level 4. Under the magistrate were the 4 prefectural magistrates of the 4 prefectures, level 5. But now there was no magistrate in the city of Wei. The previous magistrate went back to his hometown to mourn, and it usually took a year. So in the city of Wei, there were only 4 prefectural magistrates with official titles. Now there were 3. As for the rest of the officials without official titles, the ones with the most authority and prestige, other than the 4 chief arresters of the prefectures, were the arresters of the prefectures. In the Liuhe prefecture under the jurisdiction of Li Yaoxi, Yin Pingji's words carried the most weight. There were more than 100,000 people in the prefecture, and everyone with a reputation knew that Inspector Yin was popular in both the legal and illegal circles. Even Magistrate Li had to be polite to Inspector Yin on some matters. When a new store opened or a shop opened, anyone who didn't show respect to Inspector Yin would never be able to continue doing business. So the innkeeper was very surprised to see such a figure standing up to welcome the young and old. Then he looked at Li Yunxin, who was looking at Inspector Yin with a smile, casually cupping his hands. Oh, so fast. What happened? Yin Pingji took a deep breath and reluctantly gave a smile to the innkeeper. Old Wang, go ahead with your business. I have something to discuss with you. The innkeeper was full of surprise. Go ahead, go ahead. I won't disturb your business. Then he turned and said, I didn't know you two were Inspector Yin's friends. It's not a crime to not know, 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 it's not a crime to not know. You two don't have to pay the bill. Li Yunxin smiled. Thank you. Pack up the food upstairs and send it to the Dragon King Temple, the one behind the Hongfu Escort Agency. Ah yes, you are a chain company, you don't know that the small escort agency is on Taoshi Road. The innkeeper hurriedly nodded his head and loudly ordered the waiter to prepare a table just as it is, and then he went behind the counter. He sat on his back but his ears perked up. Unfortunately he couldn't hear anything and could only see Inspector Yin's face. Like a grandson. Hey, Yin Pingji, you also have this day. But who on earth are these two people? After the innkeeper left, Yin Pingji carefully observed Li Yunxin's face and slowly said a few words. Just now Madame Qiao was killed by the yamen runner who guarded her in the backyard. Did you also do this? Chapter 52. But Li Yunxin didn't stop. He just walked slowly out of the door. Yin Pingji had to follow him and stared at his face. Li Yunxin didn't stop until he walked into the sunlight outside of Nanmuju. While tidying his clothes and cuffs, he squinted at the people on the street and said, as a civil servant you need evidence. It was obviously the yamen runner who killed them. It has nothing to do with me. Seeing his reaction, Yin Pingji really believed him. But for some reason he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Instead he spoke more fluently. Good. I won't talk nonsense. He looked at Lu Laodao and then at Li Yunxin. I, Yin Pingji, admire those who are capable. What you did today, not only I couldn't see through it, but those two also couldn't see through it. I'm convinced because of this. You are flexible. Mr. Yin is a great man. But I only have one thing to ask of you. Don't kill any more people. Yin Pingji looked at Li Yunxin and said sincerely, 2 people died in one day and they died in the mansion. If Qiao Jiaming dies, this case can't be closed. In the future, as long as I have a say in the city of Wei, you can do whatever you want. Just don't make it difficult for me this time, okay? Lu Laodao looked at Yin Pingji and felt his eyeballs were going to pop out. He was a native of the city of Wei, so he certainly knew this Inspector Yin. When did he talk to anyone like this? All he wanted now was to push Li Yunxin aside and say to Constable Yin with cupped hands, "Oh ye, let's settle this matter." However, he saw that Li Yunxin had already tidied up her clothes. She turned around and looked at Constable Yin seriously. Mr. Yin, we may have to deal with each other a lot in the future. So it's better to make some things clear first. For example, you should know what kind of person I am first. Then we will get along much better. I don't like to scare people, I don't like to joke, and I don't like idiots. That's why I said that all 3 of them must die, and that's exactly what I meant. He wasn't trying to scare anyone. I'm not joking when I say that it's my fault. As long as I have a way, he will definitely be in trouble. Now that you know these 2 points, Mr. Yin, you don't have to say anything else. Because if you say anything else, it will make me unhappy. I will feel that you are a very, very annoying person and my thoughts will not be clear. You're not an idiot, you should understand what I'm saying. Even though he knew about Li Yunxin's methods, even though he was shocked and astonished, even though he said those words that sounded like he was begging and admitting defeat, hearing Li Yunxin's words made Yin Pingji feel embarrassed. His face was red for the first time in a long time after being reprimanded so harshly by a youth. He took a deep breath and squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. Are you threatening me? Li Yunxin tilted his head slightly and nodded. Yes. I am threatening you, intimidating you. If you continue to annoy me, I will kill you. After saying this, he smiled and turned around to leave. Lu Laodao kept saying, hey hey. He looked at Yin Pingji and then at Li Yunxin and finally chased after him. Brother Exen, I know you're very capable. But this... Lu Laodao lowered his voice on the street. This person... Brother Exen, aren't you afraid that he will really come to make trouble? At that time you will really... He won't. Li Yunxin answered him directly. If he really made up his mind to make trouble for me because of what I said, he wouldn't have lived until now and wouldn't have been able to get this position. Lu Laodao had to believe his words, but he couldn't help but worry in his heart. He felt that Brother Exen seemed to be too arrogant these days. Didn't he say that he would stay quietly in the city of Wei for a period of time? Of course, Lu Laodao didn't know about Li Yunxin's calculative. This Yin Pingji had investigated him. He didn't know what channels and means he had used to find out his background. After staying in the city of Wei for so many years, he not only found out the truth, but also was very sure about it. It could be seen that he had indeed used some trustworthy channels to investigate him. Li Yunxin had a clear understanding of himself. He knew that at present he might be able to overwhelm his opponent in Taoism, Kung Fu and techniques. But when it came to human resources in this world, he couldn't compare to 1/10,000th of Yin Pingji. But even such a person firmly believed the fake news. Then the person who deceived him and covered for him. Who was it? He wanted to know this person. He wanted to tame Yin Pingji and make him his loyal dog. Then now he was taming a dog. He and Lu Laodao strolled on the street for a while and bought a hanging whip. It was not the New Year's Day, so it was not easy to buy it. But in these things Lu Laodao seemed to be able to do it with ease. After greeting several old fellows and saying, it was a false alarm, he really got it. After the morning, the two of them strolled outside and gradually felt tired. They went home. On the way, Laodao still couldn't help asking Li Yunxin, how did Madame Qiao die? When asking this, Lu Laodao was a little shocked. Look at the state he was in. Under the blazing sun in the middle of the street, he asked, how did he die? He was eager to know what magical means Brother Exin had used, but he didn't care about the life itself. After asking, he muttered in his heart, I'm going to be possessed by the devil, I'm going to be possessed by the devil. Li Yunxin smiled as usual and said in the usual calm tone, I've told you so much before. This time I'll give you some advice. You can think about it yourself. I went out a lot in those days. When I was free, I strolled on the street and looked for someone to talk to. At night, I went to the Qiao family and eavesdropped on them. I just listened to these things. Madame Qiao was a little tricky. She was not sick and seldom went out, so she had few enemies. So I planned to let Qiao Jiaming kill her. But later, when I inquired about Qiao Jiaming, I got involved with her. Madame Qiao was in her 30s and her original name was Wang Xianxia. She was born in a farmer's family and looked good. She had a childhood sweetheart named Long Taoyi. Later, Wang Xianxia often went to the city to sell mountain products and was seen by Qiao Duanhong. Qiao Duanhong liked her, so he sent someone to propose marriage. Although Qiao Duanhong was a little old, he had his own career and company, right? So the Wang family promised Wang Xianxia to him. Then his childhood sweetheart Long Taoyi was sad. He couldn't forget her, so he worked hard to become a civil servant. It was the Yamen runner. Think about it, the Qiao family had been running the escort agency for several generations. Previously, the whole family had to go to the escort agency. Why were they so miserable? Because Long Taoyi had been making trouble. Chapter 53. The King of Hell is easy to provoke, but the little demons are hard to deal with. Long Taoyi was a small Yamen runner, but he was still an authorized official. It was easy for him to cause trouble for a small escort agency. Now that the Qiao family is finished, won't Long Taoyi be happy? This person is also infatuated with love and has yet to marry. Just for Wang Xianxia. How do you think Wang Xianxia reacted? Qiao Duanhong was dead and the only man in the Qiao family was Qiao Jiaming. However, Qiao Jiaming had an affair with Madame Qiao, so he didn't like her because she was old. Wang Xianxia is more cunning than Qiao Jiaming and Madame Qiao combined. She wasn't in a hurry and let Qiao Jiaming torment her like a sinner. I'll follow that Long Taoyi after I'm done with this matter. He has plenty of ways to get the family's wealth from that good-for-nothing Qiao Jiaming. But she's a woman. She knows that she's getting old, and she also knows that distance makes the heart grow fonder. The reason why Long Taoyi loved her was because of the memories from more than 10 years ago, as well as the anger in his chest. If we really let him succeed now, and the two of them have slept together a few times, it's hard to say if Long Taoyi feels that it's not the same feeling as back then and dumps her. It's easy if Wang Xianxia thinks this way. She had been going out recently, so she could be considered to be acquainted with Yin Shuerua. I knew when they were likely to meet, and if they didn't, I could make it so. That's why I chatted with that little girl in the front yard when I had nothing to do. Hee old Lu, do you really think that I like that little Lolita? I'm trying to put something in her head. Occasionally she would bump into Wang Xiangxiao and greet her out of courtesy. Then they would start chatting for some reason. Wang Xiangxiao's heart was filled with men, and Yin Shuerua's heart was filled with me. What were they talking about? Talk about men. He would keep hinting to Wang Xiangxiao that it's best to keep a distance from a man. Let them watch. If they couldn't eat it, they would be dead set on it. Wang Xiangxiao already had this idea in her heart, and now she has made up her mind. This might have worked on other men, but it's different now. But on Long Taoyi, as Li Yunxin said this, the two of them crossed a bridge. Lu Laodao listened attentively. He didn't understand how his brother Xin understood women's thoughts so well. Li Yunxin was a little tired from walking, so he leaned against the stone railing and stopped. He watched as a man in black with a knife led a black horse across the bridge. A man refused to marry a woman he liked in his youth. How big of a deal is this at your time? Isn't it huge? He didn't even have a back. How unfilial. But Long Taoyi still did it. It didn't matter if he did it. Back then you and Wang Xiangxiao weren't engaged, and Wang Xiangxiao was willing to marry Qiao Duanhong. You've been making things difficult for her all these years because of this. That's not right. This means that Long Taoyi has a very obvious and serious paranoid personality. What was a paranoid personality like? Love jealousy. Sensitive. Stubborn and inflexible. You like to complain and blame. Ah, look at me. That's right, I'm a bit of a paranoid personality. I'm very vengeful. Lu Laodao hurriedly waved his hand. No, brother Xu. Li Yunxin laughed. Old Lu, if you want to learn my technique, you must first understand what kind of person you are. This technique of mine is called the study of the mind. So you don't need to say these things. I know I have a problem, and a very serious psychological problem. But that doesn't matter, I can control it. Continue talking about Long Taoyi. Knowing that he is such a person, it's very easy. In my place, every paranoid personality disorder person is the best knife, sword, and killer. He originally held a grudge against Wang Xiangxiao for marrying Qiao Duanhong. Not only did he hate Qiao Duanhong, he also hated Wang Xiangxiao. But he didn't know it. Now that Qiao Duanhong is gone and Wang Xiangxiao has come to find him, he feels even more aggrieved than before. You gave your best years to that person. So now he most hopes that Wang Xiangxiao will flatter him carefully and quickly hand over everything he has. At this time Wang Xiangxiao is playing hard to get. I will slightly guide and hint him through other ways, and the hostility in his heart will become stronger. He suspects Wang Xiangxiao, and this time he will let her down again. He feels that she is indifferent just to take advantage of him. He always wants to get it but can't get it. Love gives birth to hatred. When Madame Qiao went out today, I have asked Yin Shuerua to hint to her for many days. Today she wears red. It's bad luck to pass the court. Wear red. Red. It's also the color of wedding dress. What will happen next? Now you will see it. After Li Yunxin finished speaking, he got up. Let's go home. It's cold. Lu Laodao opened his mouth slightly and followed behind him as if he was sleepwalking. Just like this. He killed another person. When they arrived at the alley in front of the Dragon King temple, they found that there was already a waiter waiting in front of the door with 2 food boxes. The two of them walked around, but the waiter waited for an hour. Seeing that the two of them finally came back, he hurriedly got up from the wall. You two are back. Shopkeeper Wang asked me to bring it to your mansion, so I waited in front of the door for a while. Lu Laodao had never received such hospitality, so he hurriedly took it. The waiter cupped his hands to the two of them and was about to leave. Li Yunxin stared at him and suddenly said, "Little brother." Chapter 54. Lu Laodao put the last piece of marinated beef into his mouth and drank the wine in one gulp. Then he wiped his mouth, removed some meat from his white beard and sat up straight. Li Yun looked at the dishes on the table and asked, "Don't you want to eat some more?" The old man shook his head and looked straight at him. "Come on. I'm full. The dishes from Moon and Ju over there are actually really good." Li Yunxin sighed. "If you were really full I would have told you. I'm afraid this is the last good meal you'll have." Lao Dao's face tightened, carefully trying to figure out his expression. Li Yunxin spread out his hands. "Don't look. It's not a joke. It's a long story. I can tell you some of it and some of it is my privacy. I'll tell you what you can understand and you can fill in the blanks with your own imagination." Lao Dao always couldn't fully understand some of the words in Brother Xian's words, so he just nodded. He knew that Li Yun had something very important to tell him. Before that he let him eat a good meal and drink some wine. Lao Dao felt that the matter seemed to be a bit serious. "The matter I have to start from that night. That night I was chased by two retarded people." It was afternoon when Li Yunxin began to tell the story. The sunlight shone into the small pond in the courtyard, and the green lotus leaves were almost transparent, casting a shadow on the bottom of the pond. When he was about to finish, the sky had already darkened. The last bit of the setting sun lingered in the northeast corner of the courtyard, and smoke could be seen not far away. The air began to be filled with the aroma of food, and occasionally women in the back street could be heard laughing and scolding their disobedient children. There was a burning cloud on the horizon, golden yellow, like a whole mountain carved out of topaz. On such an ordinary spring evening in such an environment full of human feelings, Lao Dao heard Li Yunxin's last words. He wasn't dreaming in the afternoon. He saw the 9th young master and then he fainted. He came looking for you and who knows when he will come looking for you. If you're afraid you can move out first. Lu Laodao blankly sat by the stone table for a long time, not knowing if it was because he was shocked by this matter or because he was already scared out of his wits. A man-eating great fiendish demon actually existed. Furthermore, they would come knocking on his door. According to Brother Exen, although he looked like a human, his humanity was almost non-existent. Li Yunxin saw that he wouldn't wake up for a while, so he stood up and broke a bamboo leaf to play with. Lu Laodao's reaction was easy to understand. Everyone in this world knew that cultivators existed, and they imagined them to be mysterious and unfathomable. Even for people like Tsong Yunzi and Pun Nenzi who stayed in the city and were often seen by people, mortals would think that maybe at night the celestial master would go far away to kill the demons. In his previous world something unexplainable happened. People said that it was aliens and that it was a secret government experiment. But in this world there was only one explanation for unusual things happening, which was mysticism. People also believed in ghosts and demons. The number of ghosts and demons was definitely more than cultivators but less than humans. Mortals built cities and farmlands, recuperated, built their own dynasties and became more and more prosperous. Thus the demons gradually retreated to the remote mountains and forests. Occasionally, there were powerful cultivators who mingled in the human world. Some were good, some were evil, and they left behind many legends. But in the end they were only legends. Demons wouldn't come to the city and stand on the street, telling people that they were a different species, come and see. Therefore people believed in such things. But most people wouldn't be able to see them in their lifetime. Or maybe they saw them or even lived together but they didn't know. Therefore Li Yunxin could understand Lu Laodao's feelings. The thing in the legends had appeared in the most realistic way. For every mortal this was a huge shock and a sense of unreality. After a while Lao Dao said, "I'm not leaving." Li Yunxin turned around. "Oh, I'm not leaving." Lao Dao reached for the wine. He wanted to take the cup first but after thinking for a while he directly took the wine pot. He opened the lid and drank a mouthful, wiped the water off his beard and said, "Hey, I Lao Dao have stayed in this Dragon King temple for my whole life. Now Brother Exen, you're here again and you've taught me so many things. Although if you don't say it I'm embarrassed to call you Lao Dao, but in fact Brother Exen, you're my second master. If I leave now I'll first be sorry to my master and then I'll be sorry to you, Brother Exen. I'm not leaving. I Lao Dao am already this old, how long can I live? Even if I die I'll die here. I'm not leaving." The sky darkened and the bamboo forest became even darker. Li Yunxin looked at him with sparkling eyes. "You're really not leaving? You might die." Lao Dao took another mouthful of wine, waved his hand and his sleeves rustled in the wind. He said with a heroic spirit, "Brother Exen, don't provoke me. I know that your past must not be simple. I saw you kill people today and Lao Dao, well, I was really frightened and felt that you were going to become a devil." He put the other hand on his thigh, drank up the wine in the wine pot and slammed it on the table. "After that, Lao Dao, I thought, well, didn't you treat me well? That Madame Qiao and Qiao Jiaming are all inferior to pigs and dogs. This kind of people, well, I killed them." His body swayed back and forth as he spoke. I've been a good-for-nothing for most of my life. This time Lu Lao Dao must follow Brother Xan well." With a plop he fell to the ground. There were 4 pots of Mu Nanchun in the food box of Mu Nanju, and he drank all of them. Li Yunxin sighed, walked up to him and lifted his foot to kick his leg, which was still on the stone bench, down so that he could lie down more comfortably. Then he squatted down and looked at Lu Lao Dao carefully. He had a gray beard and a wrinkled face. His skin was loose and dull and there were even faint age spots on his neck. This was the image of an old man who had been tortured by life for decades, which was common in this era. But such a cowardly old man had been with him for so many days. He didn't hate him. Li Yunxin stared at him for a long time, and then reached out to take a chopstick from the stone table on the side. He wiped the chopstick on Lao Dao's body, and then broke it with a little force with his fingers. The sharp fracture was shimmering in the newly fallen night because of the grease that had not been wiped clean. Li Yunxin put the tip of the chopstick on Lao Dao's neck. This lasted for a quarter of an hour. He stood up and casually threw the half chopstick aside. "Humph. An old man." His voice rang out in the courtyard, which was particularly clear, because the sound of insects had disappeared at some point. Li Yunxin's body suddenly stiffened slightly. He stood where he was and was silent for a while. Then he slowly took 2 steps forward and looked back. Behind him, a white-clothed man with a face that was far more handsome than his opened his mouth and revealed a charming smile. "You're still so interesting, little guy." Chapter 55. My good friend, long time no see. The handsome young man's voice suddenly changed. If one listened carefully, it was still the same gentle and pleasant voice. But if the emotions conveyed by this voice were cold and heartless during the day, then at this moment, this voice was suffused with a strange feeling of weariness. Whether it was the ending, the turn, or the ups and downs of the tone, it seemed to have an indescribable rhythm. From this moment on, Li Yunxin exerted all of his abilities and the subtle intuition that his 2 lifetimes of experience had given him, because he knew clearly that the biggest crisis since he was born had come. His eyes didn't miss any details of the other party. The movement of the facial muscles, the slight trembling of the eyelids, the subtle upward curl of the corners of the mouth, and the slight tilt of the shoulders. The 9th young master was satisfied with what he said just now. Right now, this big demon was temporarily in a state of pleasure. The 9th young master walked briskly in the yard. His robe sleeves fluttered under the moonlight, looking very beautiful. Then he walked to Lu Lao Dao and smiled. "This place is not bad. Little guy, I came here in the afternoon." His eyes flashed with joy and novelty. "But we are friends. So I didn't break into your house. You see, we are friends, huh?" Li Yunxin maintained an appropriate degree of meekness, but he didn't make the other party feel humble. He realized that the 9th young master was sincere when he said those words. At least he was sincere at the moment. Especially when he mentioned the word friend. This big demon didn't have many friends before. That was a normal thing, right? There weren't many demons as strong as him, so it was normal that they didn't know each other well and didn't have friends who matched their status. That Bai Yunxin was also a big demon and she seemed to know the 9th young master. But the problem was, she didn't seem to see the 9th young master as a friend. Li Yunxin still remembered the greedy gleam in the eyes of the seemingly harmless girl when she heard about the whereabouts of the 9th young master. Li Yunxin could understand the 9th young master's fondness for the novelty of friends. But if it was not his illusion, or if there was a difference in the expression of emotions between humans and monsters, he would have realized that the joy of the 9th young master seemed to be more than just having a friend. He noticed that the 9th young master would squint his eyes slightly when he expressed his joy. His eyebrows would droop slightly. If Li Yunxin had not focused all his attention on his reaction, he would not have noticed it at all. Narrowing his eyes meant that he was sad. The frown on his face meant that he was still a little angry. Both of them were the fleeting and subtle emotions that were mixed in the joy just now. Perhaps even the ninth young master himself did not notice them. However, these subtle expressions could not be hidden unless one had undergone extremely strict and long-term training. It was not directed at his own emotions. Li Yunxin realized that there was something else about the ninth young master. Maybe it was his opportunity. He remembered this in his heart and smiled gently. It's best that you treat me as a friend. When I saw you just now, I thought you were going to eat me. He took 2 steps away and said, I knew you passed by here a few days ago. And you ate 2 people. The concubine of the prefectural magistrate, right? When he said this, the ninth young master had already taken a step away with his back facing him. But when he heard this, his head suddenly turned 180 degrees and stared at Meng Qi from behind without moving his body. Huh. He squinted his eyes and his pupils seemed to shrink slightly. You also know about this. Li Yunxin's heart skipped a beat. This demon was really temperamental. This was already the most pleasing and agreeable thing he could deduce from the current situation. Seeing the ninth young master's round pupils had become oval and the color of his eyes became lighter and lighter until they became light yellow, Li Yunxin still acted as if he did not notice all this and laughed. Ha, guess what happened next? Li Yaoxi, that idiot, unfortunately provoked me. I'm going to kill him today. An idiot who asked for trouble. He didn't know that he had to die if he provoked me. The ninth young master's head did not move, but his body slowly turned back. He stared at Li Yunxin for a while and his eyes gradually turned black again. Interesting. He clapped his hands and laughed. You are an interesting friend. That person is as interesting as you. I can't bear to eat him. He laughed as he walked to the stone bench and sat down. He casually picked up old Daoist Lu, grabbed his left arm and was about to put it into his mouth. He said, You said it was a passing, but it wasn't exactly a passing, Li Yunxin hurriedly whispered. Wait, ninth young master. The expression on ninth young master's face turned cold when he was interrupted. This person is also my friend. Li Yunxin laughed. You know, these people are boring. But I don't have the supernatural power of the ninth young master, and I can come and go like the wind. Someone has to take care of me. This Lao Dao is rare and I don't get tired of him. Oh, I see. The ninth young master actually threw Lao Dao away and seemed a little relaxed. I say. You are such an interesting friend, why would you give it to an idiot like me to eat? It's firewood and has no juice. So I don't have to force myself to eat it. I thought it was your kind intention. You said I passed by the city of Wei? Not really. The ninth young master was bored and he used his finger to draw on the stone table. Every time he drew, he left a mark. I live near the city of Wei. After saying this, he looked at Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin knew what he was thinking and his face showed just the right amount of surprise. It didn't make him look stupid and boring but also flattered him. The ninth young master also lives near here? Huh. Guess how I can find you? I really don't know. Tell me, I'm very curious. The ninth young master laughed. That night, did you see my real body? This sentence reminded Li Yunxin of that night. It was raining heavily. Outside the door, there were huge green scales, the sound of steel rubbing against each other, and yellow eyes as tall as a man with long and thin pupils. A huge and terrible monster. You didn't see it clearly, did you? He laughed again and squinted at Li Yunxin as if he thought of something funny. I saw you being chased by 2 Taoist priests into the door. But they were too noisy and annoyed me. Did you see me before you entered the door? You saw me. But, well, I was also very bored that night and I was hiding from an annoying guy. The more he talked, the more excited he became and there was a dangerous light in his eyes. I still remember they said you have a treasure here. Chapter 56. Li Yunxin's heart skipped a beat. When the ninth young master said that he was actually outside that night, he already had a bad feeling. Now, it really came back to this matter. But he understood that the ninth young master really thought it was fun. Because the smile on his face was a happy smile, and the light in his eyes was full of strong curiosity. The light was so strong. Li Yunxin understood that if he went against the ninth young master's wishes when he was in the best mood, the demon would definitely fly into a rage. Perhaps he had overestimated himself by flying into a rage. The most reasonable reaction was to tear himself into two pieces with a cold face. He would no longer be interested in looking at the treasure, so he would wrap himself in a cloud and leave. This bitch, Li Yunxin sighed in his heart. He put his hand into his clothes and took out the jade slip that he kept close to his body. This is it. A jade slip. If the ninth young master likes it, you can take it. After saying this, he was shocked. The jade slip emitted a milky white halo. A second later, a dot of light flickered and floated into view. Then it was a string of words that he was used to. His conjecture was indeed correct. This thing needed demonic power to open. He had been looking at the things that were open to him in the jade slip for the past few days. But the remaining demonic power in the jade slip came from the short contact with the ninth young master and Bai Yunxin, so it was quickly used up. Until today, after being in contact with this big demon for so long, it was finally opened again. It was the first time the ninth young master saw this thing and he was very happy. He reached out his hand and took it. He looked left and right and then fiddled with the jade slip with his fingers. Li Yunxin knew that he couldn't open it. No one in this world could open it except him. Sure enough, after fiddling with it for a while, he lost interest. He pretended to give it back to him. Li Yunxin restrained himself. He didn't want to show a trace of desire. He didn't know if the ninth young master would play with him again and refused to give it to him like a kid. Halfway through, the ninth young master suddenly tilted his head. How do I open this? I don't know at all. Li Yunxin shrugged. I just treat it as a treasure and keep it close to my body. Maybe it will be useful. I see. The ninth young master looked at Li Yunxin and smiled. Then why do you keep it? It was useless. Since we are friends, I, little nine, am not a petty person. Oh, I'll give you something in exchange for this piece of trash. In the future we'll keep it for ourselves. When I want to eat you, I remember that we've exchanged things. I definitely won't eat you alive. After he finished speaking, he casually put the translucent jade slip into his bosom, but he didn't take out his hand. She fumbled around in her bosom for a while and frowned slightly. Then she jerked her hand out. With a rustling sound, she actually took out a leather armor. Li Yunxin stared at his chest for a while. Spring sun, thin shirt, where did he get this thing? He naturally knew about Sumeru mustard seed and interspatial storage bag, but they didn't exist in this world. Previously, when Bai Yunxin gave him the small sword, he also fumbled around in his sleeve for a while. Then he exerted a little force and pulled out that extremely sharp sword. Could it be that this kind of big demon had a secret method that he didn't know about? He looked at the leather armor again. It was just a thin piece of armor. It was sleeveless and could be worn close to the body. It was so thin, it looked like a CT film of him at that time. But there was another detail. The ninth young master took it out and scratched it casually. It seemed that he felt that something was stuck on it and wasn't satisfied. After scratching it a few times, the leather armor was still intact. Li Yunxin subconsciously looked at the stone table where his fingers had left a few marks. He sighed in his heart again but pretended to be happy and said, "Thank you, ninth young master. I'll definitely keep it close to my body. But you said that you live nearby. Where do you live?" The ninth young master's pupils suddenly shrank. He stared at him. "Why do you ask this?" "Oh, you just said to me, you want to explore my mansion." He interrupted Li Yunxin's words. His pupils had completely shrunk into a thin line, and he suddenly took a step forward. Li Yunxin really didn't know which words, which tone, and which look of his angered him. Or perhaps this great fiendish demon was simply temperamental in nature. Cold sweat suddenly appeared on his back. He held his breath, not letting himself look too excited, and said with a smile, "Ninth young master." Before he finished his words, the ninth young master suddenly turned his head and stared straight at the northwest. After staring for a moment, he waved his sleeves and slapped Li Yunxin to the wall. Then, wrapped in a cloud of mist, he flew up to the sky. When the demon fled, the strong wind blew the bamboo leaves in the small courtyard, making a rustling sound. It took a long time for the wind to calm down. After a while, Li Yunxin, who was leaning against the wall, slowly let out a moan. "What the F***ck?" First he gently moved his arms and legs to make sure that there were no fractures in his limbs. Then he slowly inhaled and exhaled deeply to make sure that there were no fractures in his ribs and lungs. Then he closed his eyes and carefully felt for a while before he slowly stood up from the ground. F** King crazy. A demon is a F** King demon. Just now, any ordinary person, even if his real strength was similar to what he had shown, would have been slapped to death on the wall. Fortunately, he was in the transcendent state. There was a difference between the painter's transcendent state and the Taoist priest's transcendent state and the swordsman's transcendent state. The similarity between the three was that their spirit was strong enough and they had a deep understanding of their own sect. They could shift their focus to abandon the 7 emotions and 6 desires instead of the cultivation of their spirit. Starting from the transcendent state, the cultivator's main mission was to pass the God's test. This was because there were many cultivation methods above this state that could not be practiced by those who did not have a clear mind. The transcendent state was a watershed. Countless cultivators were stopped at this point. This was because they could not abandon all kinds of emotions and desires. When they practiced more advanced cultivation methods, it was easy for them to be possessed by the devil. When the Taoist priest and the swordsman cultivated to the transcendent state, they already possessed great supernatural powers and power. Riding on a crane to fly in the sky, riding on a sword to escape far away, these were the signs of a cultivator in the transcendent state. They could break free from the shackles of the earth. In addition to the various techniques used to fight with humans and demons, their power should not be underestimated. If a cultivator at this stage was well prepared, without any interference from others, and with the help of the right time and place, it was not difficult for him to destroy a city by himself. However, the painters and Taoist priests in the past, cultivated to the transcendent state, they could not be compared to the Taoist priest and the swordsman. When the two met on a narrow path and suddenly fought, 5 painters might not be able to defeat a Taoist priest or a swordsman. Although the true state and the mystic state might be different. But those things, Li Yunxin had no way of knowing. Even so, when a cultivator tempered his spirit, he tempered his body too. Li Yunxin could not unleash the strength of the transcendent state, but he had the capital of the transcendent state, a body that was far stronger than an ordinary person or even an ordinary cultivator. That was why he did not lose his life this time. The 9th young master merely waved his hand out of anger. If it was not Li Yunxin but someone else who took his thin armor just a moment ago, he would have been killed by the 9th young master. He stood up and walked a few steps before he slowly walked to the stone table and sat down. He stared at the sleeping Lu Laodao. But he was not actually looking at him, he was arranging the thoughts in his mind. The jade scroll of enlightenment was gone. Well, there must be a way to get it back. But that was not the most important thing right now. The 9th young master knew where he was. Of course he could run. But he did not doubt that the armor given to him by the 9th young master was the same as the sword given to him by Yunxin. He could not run away. He had to get along with him. The problem was that the time they had spent together was too short. Even though he had tried his best tonight, he still annoyed him at the last moment and almost got killed. What was the problem? That psycho said that he lived nearby, but he had to guess how he found this place. He had to understand him. He had to try to understand him. He had to know him like the back of his hand. This psycho. Li Yunxin stared at Lu Laodao for a while and suddenly raised his eyebrows. He thought of something. When Lu Laodao woke up, the sky was already bright. After getting drunk, he actually slept all the way until dawn. It was probably because Mu Nanchun was indeed a good drinker. But his body was a little sore, as if he had fallen. The window was half open and there was a light fog in the courtyard. The morning air mixed with water vapor and the fragrance of plants entered his lungs. Lu Laodao felt comfortable all over. But when the comfortable feeling passed, he felt more clear-headed. Laodao's face turned bitter. He remembered that he had boasted yesterday that he would never leave this place. Oh my God, Tui. Drinking is a hindrance. I said things that I didn't think of properly. He could not lie down when he thought of this. He lifted the thin quilt, wiped his face, combed his hair with his fingers and rushed to Li Yunxin's main room with a sad face. As soon as he entered, he saw Brother Exen eating his sandwich. It was to use 2 pieces of fried steamed buns with vegetable leaves, sauced meat and eggs, and eat them with your hands. Previously, Laodao was curious and asked about the meaning of this name. Brother Exan told him that the 3 enlightened referred to the 3 things in the middle. The meat was soy sauce, the vegetable leaves, and the non-meat was the egg. These three things included all kinds of food that the public could eat, and took the meaning of three, which meant that the three gave birth to all things. Eating these three things was actually eating all kinds of food in the world, and it was to cultivate the mind. Using 2 pieces of mantu to eat was to strengthen the body so that the vitality of these three things would not run out. Eating these things was cultivation, and it was also to understand one's nature. This was the three enlightened. As for the word cure, it carried the meaning of research and cultivation. It further indicated that this wasn't just eating but also cultivation. The two were combined into one named sandwich. Lao Dao was suddenly filled with respect, thinking that the disciples of the big sects were indeed different. He used to refuse to eat like this, thinking that it was undignified and like a child. But after listening to Li Yunxin's teachings, he was enlightened and made sandwiches for the two of them every morning. Brother Xian seemed to be very happy that he could do this, but Lu Laodao always felt that there was a strange smile on his face. Li Yunxin was eating while quickly flipping through a stack of books on the table. Lu Laodao glanced at it and was surprised. "Brother Xian, why are you reading the temple annals?" Li Yunxin didn't raise his head. "I have something to tell you first. Hold the door and don't get excited. Last night the monster came and wanted to eat you, but I told him that you were my servant, so he didn't eat you. If he comes again in the future, you have to play the role of my servant. Okay, close the door, it's scary outside. I have something important to do." It was the first time that Lu Laodao heard Li Yunxin talking to him at such a speed, and he was stunned for a long time. He opened his mouth to ask but saw a stack of books on the other side of the table, and realized that Brother Xian didn't sleep at all last night. So he took a deep breath and slowly went out of the door, letting the turbulence in his heart subside. That demon actually came last night. Brother Xian saved his life again. Li Yunxin saw Lao Dao quietly went out and continued to read the temple annals. There was a temple annals in the Daqing state dynasty. Li Yunxin used to know county annals, but he didn't hear about temple annals until he came here. The Dragon King Temple in the Daqing state dynasty was a strange thing. He couldn't find a similar institution or organization from his original world to compare it. As long as there was land, a temple could be built. Whether it was a collection of money from believers or a big family, after the temple was built, they had to report to the government and explain what it was for. Other temples didn't have any special restrictions, but the Dragon King Temple, there was an obligation. The temple attendant of the Dragon King Temple had to record the rain that year. It didn't mean that he had to record what happened every day, but it was about how many people came to the temple to pray for rain on a certain day, and when it rained, when it was a big event, the temple attendant had to record it. Li Yunxin speculated that it was because the Daqing state dynasty didn't have a weather bureau. So a master patted his head. "Well, let the Dragon King Temple do it. Anyway, it was to pray for rain." But other than that, the temple annals also recorded something else. At some point in time, a certain temple attendant began to record down the number of people who went missing around the time of a certain rain. Once it started, it slowly became a habit and was kept from generation to generation. Li Yunxin spent the whole night reading through the records of the temple in the past 140 years. Then he closed the last book, rubbed his forehead with his fingers, and walked out of the door. Lu Laodao wasn't there. He probably went to clean the vestibule. These days he had to go to court and was framed, so there were fewer pilgrims coming to the vestibule, so he neglected to clean it. The fog had dispersed, and Li Yunxin sat on the stone steps in front of the house, basking in the sun for a while. He felt that he knew the real identity of the 9th young master. Last night, the 9th young master had said it clearly, but he was only worried about the jade slip of enlightenment, so he only remembered it but didn't think deeply. The 9th young master said, "Did you see me before you entered the door?" "Ah, you saw me. But, well, I was also very bored that night and I was hiding from an annoying guy." He said that he saw him before he entered the temple. And he was hiding from someone. On the rainy night when he was chased by 2 swordsmen before he fell into the temple, he did glance at the eaves of the temple. In that short moment, Li Yunxin saw a corner of the eaves in the distance with the help of the electric light. On the eaves, a dark green Qi-Wen glanced at him in the heavy rain. The 9th young master. Not a demon. He was Qi-Wen, the 9th son of the dragon. Chapter 57. Although Li Yunxin was already mentally prepared for the things related to fiends in this world, after deducing this fact, she still felt a strong sense of surprise and uneasiness in her heart. The dragon had 9 sons, each different. This meant that the dragon was naturally lascivious. Wherever he went, he would have sex with humans, with all kinds of animals, giving birth to 9 sons with different appearances. The problem was that legends about dragons, phoenixes, and all kinds of famous demons and ghosts had existed a long time ago in his previous world. It was so long ago that people couldn't figure out if those magical creatures really existed in ancient times or if they were just made up by people. So, after coming to this world, he could accept the existence of these things. Maybe it was because they were 2 different planes or dimensions, and because of some rules, they both gave birth to those magical creatures. However, the matter of the dragon giving birth to 9 sons was definitely fabricated. Because although the legend of the dragon's 9 sons had a long history, it was recorded in a dynasty called Ming. The emperor was curious about the dragon's 9 sons, so he went to ask his ministers. The ministers also heard of this legend, but they didn't know much about it. Therefore, based on his vague impression, he filled in the gaps in his mind and came up with a few accurate dragon sons. Then this story slowly spread and everyone knew about it. But the things that were made up in his previous world really existed now. Li Yunxin found it hard to understand. He also faintly felt that something was not right. But this subtle sense of incongruity was quickly replaced by another worry. The dragon had 9 sons, which meant hell, there were 8 more. Another point was that the power of faith could make the demons stronger. Since in this world everyone knew about the dragon had 9 sons, and even made up their images everywhere, then they must be extremely powerful. What was the Bai Yunxin that made the powerful 9th young master afraid? Oh no. Something was wrong. There shouldn't be something in this world that could endlessly grow stronger. If this world became prosperous in the future, billions of people knew about the dragon's 9 sons, how powerful would they be? A stable real world. This situation shouldn't happen. This world was on the way to collapse. Halfway. He sighed. The collapse of the world. It wasn't something he could control. Then it would at least, 1,000 years later. But the technology tree of this world seemed to be a little crooked. If it continued to develop at this rate, it would probably stay at this level for a long time. Li Yunxin stood up, took a clean set of clothes from the clothes rack on the west side of the courtyard, went back to the house to change and then walked to the front yard. The old Daoist was chatting with a middle-aged woman. With his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes were slightly narrowed and he was stroking his beard. He had the demeanor of a sage-like master. He seemed to have calmed down a little and was not as dazed as before. Li Yunxin nodded to him. "Master, I'm going out for a while." Lao Dao saw his eyes and knew he was going to the Qiao family. He quickly winked and said, "Brother Axon, come here. There's something interesting, you should come and listen." When the woman saw Li Yunxin, her eyes squinted and she smiled happily. Everyone liked a handsome child, not to mention she had an unmarried niece. She waved her hand. "Come, let Granny tell you." At her age, in Li Yunxin's previous world, she would probably want to be called elder sister. But here she could really call herself Granny. Li Yunxin knew Lao Dao wouldn't stop him just because it was interesting, so he smiled kindly. "Granny, tell me what's interesting?" The woman looked at Li Yunxin with a smile and lowered her voice. "You too, be careful these days." After saying this, she pointed at the Qiao family and lowered her voice even more, as if she was afraid of being heard by something terrible. "It's haunted." Li Yunxin said in surprise, "It's so scary." The woman was very satisfied with his performance and said, "Granny now knows that you've all been wronged. The Qiao family must not be good people. You see, when the high-ranking official was interrogating you, didn't he die? After that, the Qiao family also died in the court, huh? Oh, this is retribution." "What retribution?" "It must be a vengeful spirit that wants to kill us." A look of concentration and excitement appeared on the woman's face, and her eyes emitted the kind of passionate light that only appeared on middle-aged women when someone was listening carefully. "Our neighbors all say that Lao Dao and the little Daoist, you're so handsome, are not the kind of people who would harm people. How can the people who harm people support Grand Celestial Master Jiavan and Dragon Lady Shiwana?" So, you see, those 3 people said that people died in the house. It must be Xiao Jiaming, that wastrel who wanted to seize the family property, so he beat all the loyal servants to death. How did he kill them? It is said that they were strangled to death with white silk. After they died, they were not satisfied, so they cut off their heads and pushed them to the old servant. How could they do it? Li Yunxin and Lao Dao looked at each other. It was really a waste of this woman's talent not to be a screenwriter. When she finished talking as if she had seen it with her own eyes, she calmly asked Lao Dao, "Don't you think so?" Lao Dao nodded. If that's the case, then. But the woman had no intention of listening to his opinion. She continued, "So the vengeful spirit came to kill us. Every night in the Qiao family's house, there is a woman laughing." Li Yunxin thought for a moment. "Grandma, there is a daughter in the Qiao family." Qiao Jiasen, who was possessed by the cat monster, was still in the house. Li Yunxin had gone there several times at night, but he told the cat monster not to make too much noise and ruin his business. The cat monster was very obedient. Although he felt it was a little strange, he didn't take it to heart. When he met Yu Meng and returned to the city, the cat monster had been very obedient, so he gradually got used to it. Recently, because he was focused on preparing for the final blow in the court, he didn't go to see the cat monster anymore. Last night he wanted to explain to her, but the 9th young master came. Was there something wrong with them? When the woman heard what he said, her eyes widened. Yes. There was a girl in the house. She was also a pitiful person, but guess what? Recently, the girl who lived next door to her house heard a group of women laughing. That voice was eccentric. It didn't sound like a human voice. Chapter 58. Hearing this, Li Yunxin was not in the mood to listen anymore. He casually put his hands on his stomach, and there was not even a hint of pain on his face. "Ouch, my stomach hurts. You talk first." Then he went out the door. Outside the door was a side street, and across from it was the high wall of the Qiao family. He was going to climb over the wall, but after listening to the woman he decided to go through the front door. If it was really haunted, then he had to go through the front door first. He was not at all worried that something would happen to the cat demon. He was just curious, because he had never really seen a haunted house. Li Yunxin had heard his parents talk about haunted houses, feng shui and qi of the earth, but he had never really experienced it. A piece of land, flat and empty, existed there. It was just a piece of land. But if you placed something on it and built something up, these differences in height would form a force. Therefore, it was possible to produce or tie something down. Then it would encircle the place and it would become a system, forming a unique ecosphere. Of course, this was what Li Yunxin called it, because he felt that these 3 words were much more concise than those that were difficult to pronounce and did not have a detailed definition. In other words, a house with people or a house that was haunted had, in a sense, life, and contained some kind of law. Usually one entered the house through the front door. Therefore, if one wanted to fully experience or observe a possible haunted house, it was best to go through the front door. Li Yunxin thought that this was probably caused by Mrs. Sanhua. But it was a good thing. It was just in line with his curiosity and desire for knowledge. To go around the back to the front door of the Qiao family's house, he actually had to walk a long way. It was about 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and there were already many people on the street. With his hands behind his back, Li Yunxin walked briskly for 10 minutes into the alley in front of the Qiao family's house. He did not notice that he was being watched by another person. Qiao Jiaming. In fact, it had only been one night, but Qiao Jiaming already felt that he couldn't hold on any longer. In the court, Li Yunxin's cruel and evil expression was still vivid in his mind. It was as if the words, "None of you can escape," were still ringing in his ears just a moment ago. Talking tough was Qiao Jiaming's specialty, but it was usually limited to talking tough. But that Li Yunxin, he really dared to kill people. Thinking of that, he felt cold sweat all over his body. Especially when he saw that Madame Qiao was stabbed to death by a yamen runner in front of him and he escaped in the chaos. He didn't know how Li Yunxin did it. However, he felt that if he had the chance to do it all over again, he would definitely run as far away as possible. He would never have anything to do with that scary guy. Previously, the bailiffs had been looking for him all over the city, but now they had all stopped. Qiao Jiaming only felt relieved, but he didn't know what this meant. Yin Pingji had accepted Li Yunxin's threat and wouldn't protect him. However, this wise idea disappeared after he didn't sleep for a whole night. In order to quench the irritation in his heart, he drank 1/2 kilogram of Mao Tu. Qiao Zheming planned to escape from the city of Wei. He needed to get some money. Although the Qiao family was gone, they still had some assets. Not to mention those gold and silver utensils, just the jewelry and beads of the Qiao family were enough for him to squander for a while. Therefore, Qiao Zheming wandered around the Qiao family early in the morning. He felt that he had to explore the situation first. He didn't want to run into a few men who were waiting for him and be taken back again. In this way he saw Li Yunxin. Wine could make him brave, which was good stuff. When he saw Li Yunxin, Qiao Zheming was squatting behind a century-old locust tree, holding a small rough porcelain wine jar in his hand. The first reaction of seeing him was to shiver and subconsciously want to escape. But this feeling quickly disappeared, and after he drank another mouthful of wine, it was replaced by a surging hatred. Because Li Yunxin didn't find him. He also had times of negligence. He was still a human. He was a human, not a demon, and didn't know any magic. He was just lucky. Well, he killed the prefectural magistrate. As for how he killed him, well, who had the patience to care? He was just lucky. He was still just a mortal. His mind, which was paralyzed by alcohol, skipped a few key facts and only focused on the most clear and intuitive things. Li Yunxin was walking to the Qiao family. He didn't find him. He could kill him. Qiao Zheming drank another mouthful of wine, and threw the porcelain bottle on the ground with a backhand, leaving only a broken stubble. Then clutching the thing, he stumbled after her. Many people noticed this man who was full of wine early in the morning, but they didn't pay much attention to him. In such an era, the efficiency of information dissemination was still extremely low. Even such a big event as the prefectural magistrate's death, there were still many people who didn't know about it. But another person took a special look at him. This person was a woman who had been standing on the street. In terms of clothes, she was actually very ordinary. She wore a white dress that was common for women in this era and this season, and covered with a light blue chiffon coat. With such a dress, if she held a round fan in her hand, she would be a weak girl from a humble family. But this woman tied a ribbon around her waist, and her whole temperament was raised. She had the tenderness and cuteness of a girl, but also a hint of heroism. Looking at her face again, you would find that she only combed a simple Daoist bun and inserted a wooden hairpin. But 2 strands of smooth black hair hung down from her cheeks, adding a little femininity in her solemnity. As for her appearance, it was hard to describe her appearance. Passers-by could see her face. They would never be disgusted by her appearance. But they would never have any shocking or obscene thoughts. It was as if when they saw her, there would be a fuzzy cloud in their mind, blocking the thought of, is this woman beautiful or ugly? Now this woman was standing under a tree on both sides empty-handed, and there was no one around her for a few steps. In this small space she seemed to be a world of her own. She looked at the passers-by coming and going, and then saw Qiao Zheming's movement in the distance. She gently tilted her head and made a sound of surprise. Interesting, she said. In fact, this interesting was said calmly with almost no fluctuation of tone. It was as if the colorful world of people in front of her was like a floating cloud to her. But in this floating cloud she saw a small cyclone. Interesting, it was just a little more interesting than not being interested at all. But even this was enough for her to lift her feet and follow up. Although the city of Wei was a big city, it couldn't be like the era of Li Yunxin where there was no soil on the roadside. The place where the woman stood was under the tree on the yellow ground. Because it hadn't rained for a few days, the ground was covered with a layer of dust. But after she walked away, there was not even a footprint there. The soles of the woman's feet were always separated from the ground by an imperceptible distance. She was treading on air as she walked. Chapter 59. The street in front of Qiao's house was slightly wider, allowing 2 carriages to travel side by side. On the other side of the street was an open canal. The canal was lined with bluestone slabs and planted with some short trees. Li Yunxin didn't know what the name of the tree was, but he saw some thumb-sized red fruits hanging between the tender green branches and leaves, exceptionally attractive. After walking for a few minutes, he could see the cornice of Qiao's house. Along the way there were some children playing with the red fruits, but as he got closer to Qiao's house there were no more people. Finally, Li Yunqin stopped in front of Qiao's house and looked inside with his hands behind his back. The black lacquered door was tightly shut. There was a pair of stone lions at the door and a big flag on each side. On one side was written Wei City's Hongfu Escort Agency, and on the other side was written Wei City's Hongfu Escort Agency. Li Yunqin looked for a while, then walked to the door and pushed it. It opened with a push. It opened without a sound. He glanced inside and frowned. When he sent Qiao Duanhong back, he walked through this door once. If he remembered correctly, there should be a screen wall when he entered from the front door. Now the screen wall was gone and there was a tree. This tree, without leaves, was thick enough for a person to wrap his arms around and had many branches. But the bark was extremely smooth, shining like jade. On the branches, it was full of gold ingots. There was no wind, but the shining gold ingots on the tree were flashing as if tempting people to pick them. There was a demon when something abnormal happened. Li Yunqin understood this. He closed his eyes. Normal cultivators, unless they used special means to open their inner eye or yin-yang eye, couldn't see nether spirits directly. But since Li Yunqin absorbed the power of wish in the temple, he could see nether spirits. The first time he saw Qiao Jiasen's faceless ghost, he noticed this abnormality. But he wasn't a person who liked to make a fuss, so he didn't take it to heart. The power of wish from incense was something exclusively enjoyed by demons. He, a living person, absorbed it, so it was reasonable for something abnormal to happen. At this time he realized that he must have seen an illusion created by the monster. He could see ghosts directly, and when he stepped into the illusions created by the monsters, he could see them more clearly and realistically. This was also the reason why cultivators were reluctant to open the yin-yang eye. Because it's easier to be confused. But since he was a cultivator, he naturally had the means to see through the mystique, as long as his realm was high enough. Li Yunqin was at the transcendent state, which was high enough for ordinary ghosts and spirits in the mortal world. So he closed his eyes for a moment and opened them again. The tree full of gold ingots had disappeared. A dried corpse stood upright in front of the screen wall, swaying slightly. Although it was a mummy, it still had eyes. Not only that, but she also had a pair of watery eyes with distinct black and white parts. Because they had no eyelids, they looked like two white-black beads embedded in their eye sockets. They were now staring at Li Yunqin motionlessly. If the dried corpse had more muscles, he would have seen that its cheeks were tightly clenched. Come on, take the bait. Li Yunqin heaved a sigh and closed the door. He took a few steps and kicked it over. He asked, "Did the one inside ask you to guard the door?" The mummy was obviously in a panic. Its big watery eyes were rolling around and its whole body was trembling. It was trying to exert its power, so that it could enchant Li Yunqin again. So he unleashed his force. It was indeed the kind of qi of a powerful cultivator that was released by the tiger's body. A cultivator's qi and spirit were always reserved. But it didn't mean that they couldn't release their qi. Suddenly, the dried corpse truly felt the power of a transcendent state cultivator, and it immediately stopped moving. Li Yunqin saw that it was muddle-headed, so he guessed that it was also a small monster that had yet to gain intelligence. He ignored it and continued to walk into the courtyard. Everything was normal as he walked forward, until he passed through the front yard and entered the backyard. As soon as he passed through the moon gate, he heard someone talking. The voice was familiar. It was Qiao Jiasen's voice. The tone was also familiar. It was Mrs. Sanhua's voice. Then he heard her say in a strange tone, 3 views. I will tell you my 3 views. My outlook on life, the world. Values. That's the 3 views. But the 3 views. Bah. Sit tight. I will tell you something. Li Yunqin stood outside the door and listened for a while with his hands behind his back. This cat monster, or should he say Mrs. Sanhua, she really had some tricks up her sleeve. The first time he met her, she knew about Daoist Danqing. Later, when Li Yunqin asked her how she knew about it, she only said that she couldn't remember. The cat monster was using Qiao Jiasen's damaged skin, and she seemed to have some mental problems. Therefore, even Li Yunqin couldn't tell whether she was telling the truth or not. Now that he was listening outside the door, he heard her telling. Because of some accidental opportunities, wild monsters gained some spiritual wisdom, so they had the heart to cultivate and pursue Dao. But the divine heart method passed by the celestial beings was not easily seen even by the wild Daoists in the secular world, let alone these strange creatures. Therefore, even the most basic method of meditating and refining qi was very precious to the monsters. Some monsters lived for a long time and encountered some opportunities, so they could also figure out some cultivation methods. This kind of monster could impart the method to other monsters. After imparting the method, they would have disciples and grand disciples. They would gather in one place and gradually become more powerful, and they might even cause trouble. What Li Yunqin heard from her was probably the method she figured out herself. It was a little rough, but it was really useful. It was just that this cat monster seemed to remember what Li Yunqin had warned her before. She used the name of 3 grand methods to talk about her own method to some unknown thing. It seemed that in the few days when he wasn't here, this cat monster used some unknown method to gather a group of monsters and became a proper Mrs. Sanhua. It seemed like she was about to open up her own altar. If it was an ordinary cultivator who encountered this kind of thing, they would definitely shout, "How dare you, demon!" and rush in to kill. But when it came to Li Yunqin, he only felt that it was interesting. First, he was influenced by the beautiful legends of Fox Immortal and Flower Fairy. Second, he clearly knew where the upper and lower limits of his ability were. If there was a problem, it wouldn't be too late to deal with it later. At this time, he just wanted to see the scene of demons dancing wildly inside. So he walked to the door of Qiao Jiasen's original bedroom and pushed it open. As soon as the door opened, Mrs. Sanhua's voice came to an abrupt stop. Li Yunqin saw that Qiao Jiasen was sitting cross-legged on a wooden table opposite the door, her neck straight. One hand was placed in front of her lower abdomen, and the other hand was pinching her middle finger and thumb. Holding it in midair, she stared at him. And in front of her, on the ground, there was a red-crowned rooster, a white-furred red-eyed rabbit, a black cat, and a gray mouse lying on the ground. These 4 animals seemed to be fascinated by Mrs. Sanhua's method. When they heard the sound of the door opening, they still hadn't come back to their senses and were still lying on the ground motionlessly. But the cat monster stared at Li Yunqin for a while, then turned around and jumped down from the table, crawling under the bed, only revealing a pair of eyes. "Huh? Grandpa, I'm talking, huh? I remember the 3 views, Only then did the 4 animals on the ground realize that something was wrong. For a moment there was chaos, and it was very lively. The rabbit jumped down from the bed and the rooster flapped its wings, wanting to fly out of the door, but it was afraid that Li Yunqin was standing there. When the black cat saw the mouse, it endured for a while, but in the end, it couldn't fight against its natural instincts. It meowed and pounced on it. The mouse was brave, and with a squeak, it crawled onto Li Yunqin's foot, put its 2 thin front paws on his ankle, and looked up at him with its 2 small black eyes. Li Yunqin knew that the cat monster was afraid that he would blame her for gathering evildoers to bring disaster to the world. But he was not in the mood to care about this. He was not in the mood to talk to the cat monster. Now he only raised his head slightly, looking up. A face without any facial features was less than 10 centimeters away from his face, as if it was staring at him. The neck behind the face was very long, all the way to the roof. Qiao Jiasen's ghost was climbing on the roof. She was also listening to the method. Chapter 60. Ever since he saw Jiasen's ghost that night, she never appeared again. Li Yunqin once wondered if she was also imprisoned outside the magistrate's office and became a member of the evil spirit array. But after spending 2 hours looking at all the faceless ghosts, he was relieved. Qiao Jiasen was not among them. The appearance of ghosts was their original appearance. Their clothes were also a part of them. Changing a ghost's clothes? That was impossible. Now she had actually come here. Most ghosts were muddle-headed and acted according to their instincts when they were alive. She came to find him probably because she had a good impression of him and was obsessed with him. Now that she had come to the cat demon's place, it was probably because her skin was still here. Li Yunqin found it interesting that something like this had happened. He reached out his hand and poked Jiasen's face. The ghost's neck suddenly shrank back and she once again clung to the roof. "Come out. I don't blame you for this kind of thing," Li Yunqin said to the cat demon under the bed. As he said that, he picked up the gray mouse and threw it out of the door. "What is this person's title?" Most animals that had gained intelligence would also have a vague understanding of their own identities. According to common sense, the cat demon should give them a title when she preached. The cat demon blinked her eyes. Seeing that Li Yunxin was really not angry at her, she rolled her eyes. There's no title. Grandpa gave me a name. Grandpa gave me a name. Li Yunxin knew what she was thinking. She looked silly like a mental patient, but she was not stupid when it came to big things. If Li Yunxin gave these beasts a name, it would mean that she wasn't angry at her anymore. But the grandpa made him uncomfortable. In the journey to the west, the monsters called the traveler, Grandpa Great Sage. Now he was called Grandpa, but he could not get used to it. He said, "Don't call me Grandpa. Call me King." The cat demon blinked her eyes and crawled out from under the bed. She seemed to be very satisfied with this title. She giggled as she sat on the bed and said, "Oh? The great king bestows a name. Li Yunxin glanced outside the door. This gray-furred rat really did understand human nature. It lay on the steps and didn't leave. He thought for a moment and said, "Your name is Shuck." The thoughts must be smooth and unobstructed, but it must also restrain the bestiality of animals, and have long achieved the meaning of the great Tao. When the gray rat heard this, it clasped its paws and bowed 9 times, then lay there motionlessly. After saying this, the big black cat meowed and rushed to the mouse's side, but it did not pounce on it. Instead, its 2 front paws left the ground and it stood up, staring at Li Yunxin with its 2 yellow eyes. Li Yunxin glanced at its lower body and knew that it was just a female cat. He thought for a moment and said, "You can call him the sheriff." Warning meant that you had to constantly remind yourself not to forget to cultivate. Zhang Chong and Chong Chong meant that you couldn't be half-hearted and have no patience. The path of cultivation was fraught with dangers. Since we are fated to meet, don't let it down. The black cat hurriedly put down its front paws and bowed 9 times. It glanced at the rat, licked its lips and stopped moving. Li Yunxin looked at her and snorted. "What are you thinking? I will give Shuck a name first and he will be your senior brother. If you dare to have evil intentions towards me again, I will skin you alive." The black cat hurriedly pressed down its ears and rubbed back. Li Yunxin turned his head and pointed at the red-eyed white-furred rabbit. "You do it." The rabbit hurriedly jumped onto the steps. "You are a rabbit, so you will be called CC. 2C. Li Yunxin thought for a moment. G refers to the foundation of the building. You used to be timid, but I want you to be steady in the future just like CC. The rabbit put up its ears, chewed with its 3-petaled mouth and also bowed 9 times. Finally, the big rooster trotted over with its head held high. Li Yunxin thought for a moment. "As for you, forget it. Let's call you Shanji. I won't tell you the name first. In the future, when you become a human and someone calls you Brother Shanji, you will understand my painstaking efforts." The big rooster also pecked 9 times. Li Yunxin waved his hand. "Well, when I came here there was a retarded person following me. I guess he has already entered the door. The 4 of you go to the yard and use your skills. I said that monsters with intelligence are born to bewitch people. I want to see how good you are. Don't kill him, I still need that person." No one knew if the 4 understood Li Yunxin's intention, but they just looked at each other and rushed out in confusion. At this time, Li Yunxin walked to the table, pulled out a stool and sat down. He sighed. "Tell me what happened. Let's talk about the corpse in front. You can't have dug that thing out from the ground. Besides, he pointed to the ceiling. Do you know that she is the original owner of your body? What are you going to do?" The cat monster always talked incoherently, and this time was no exception. It took Li Yunxin nearly a quarter of an hour to figure out where the corpse came from. Originally, there were only 4 servants left in the Qiao family, and 3 of them were killed by Meng Ao. The remaining servant girl wasn't easy to get along with either. She knew that her master's family had lost the case in court and was on the brink of death. Thus, she had evil thoughts and wanted to run away with the belongings. Originally, the cat monster didn't care about these things and only played with people in the house. But the servant girl was greedy and wanted to get the miss. Li Yunxin could understand. In this era, it was hard for a woman to get promoted. She couldn't be an official, she couldn't do business, and there was almost no chance to change her fate. Now that she was involved in this matter, it was hard not to go crazy. So she didn't leave after taking the money. At night she wanted to take the things that the miss was wearing. Who would have thought that when night came, according to the cat demon, a cloud of mist would roll in and envelop the little servant girl inside. The woman screamed twice and then went silent. The cat monster waited until the cloud flew away before she dared to look. The servant girl had turned into a dried corpse. The cat monster thought that the dried corpse looked cute and wrinkled, so she tapped it and turned it into a demon. At this point, Li Yunxin widened his eyes. Let's not talk about the cloud first. According to the cat monster's description, it shouldn't be the 9th young master, but some demon that passed by. Although it was too much of a coincidence, it was not impossible. In fact, there were some other things that had happened recently, but they weren't the most important. He was surprised that the 3 flower goddesses just poked the mummy's head, and that thing became a spirit monster? He asked about this in detail, but the cat monster couldn't tell him anything. She only said, if you remember, just tap hee. Most of the time I can't remember. Listening to what she said, it seemed that she had some kind of supernatural power that he didn't know about. But now she lost her mind and was in a trance, sometimes not. Chapter 61. This Mrs. Sanhua made Li Yunxin feel that things were not that simple. He put it aside and asked Xiao Jessen. In fact, they couldn't get anything out of her. The faceless ghost was muddle-headed. Although it was easier to communicate with the 3 flower goddess because they were both not very smart, they didn't actually say any earth-shattering secrets. She was frightened a few days ago, so she ran away. She couldn't tell what she was frightened about. Li Yunxin looked up at Jessen on the roof, thinking about how to deal with her. Just at this moment, she saw Qiao Jiaming smiling with a crooked mouth, drooling as he stumbled into the backyard. The broken wine bottle in his hand was nowhere to be seen. His eyes were blank, obviously bewitched. Li Yunxin was in the house, but he pretended not to see him. He ran a few steps with a strange smile, saw an old tree in the yard and pounced on it. He pounced on it, hugged it, took off his pants, straightened his waist and pierced between 2 branches of the old tree. Doing it. The bark of the old tree was rough and Qiao Jiaming used a lot of strength. After a dozen or so times, his lower body was already a bloody mess. Everything happened so fast that Li Yunxin was dumbfounded. Seeing this, the cat demon laughed and clapped her hands. Hey, this is fun. Li Yunxin slapped her back. Stay under the bed. At this moment, the woman walked to the gate of the Qiao family. The sky suddenly turned dark. Of course, this was how she felt. A moment ago it was warm in the morning and the next moment it was midnight. But although it was midnight, it was not particularly dark. Because a series of big red lanterns were hung in front of the Qiao family's gate. The warm and festive light dispelled the fear brought by the darkness. She was standing at the gate, but she could already hear the faint laughter inside. It was the laughter of young girls, 3 or more. There was also the smell. It was like the smell of a wedding in a rich family, the smell of wine, meat and firecrackers. Everything indicated that it was the wisest choice to walk into the mansion at midnight. There would be a soft and dry bed or a charming and lovely maid. The woman thought for a moment, then really walked in. She crossed the threshold and walked 3 or 4 steps before the door quietly closed behind her without a sound. She saw a skinny servant girl staring at her with a smile. The maidservant's eyes were wide open as if there was no upper or lower eyelids. Her eyeballs were about to pop out. But in such an environment and atmosphere, it didn't seem out of place. Instead, it was very normal. She smiled, the corners of her mouth stretching all the way to her ears, revealing 2 rows of gleaming white teeth. This smile hung on his face like a mask without the slightest change. The maidservant was like a puppet whose joints were not very flexible. She bent her waist slightly and stretched out one hand to point the way for the woman. The woman stopped in front of the servant girl and stared at her expressionlessly for a while. Then she shook her head slightly and walked in the direction that the servant girl pointed. In the night, the entire Qiao family's courtyard was lit up. Kong-ming lanterns floated in the sky, candles and incense sticks were placed beside the pond and on the rockery. White paper money floated in the wind on the branches, but under the yellow light, it forced out the aura of wealth. The woman walked a few steps and heard a man's laughter in the wind. A man in colorful clothes walked towards her with his hands behind his back, his head held high and a smile on his face. The man's steps were vigorous and light, as if he was stepping on extremely elastic cotton. His hair was combed into a high bun, tied with a large red silk bun, fluttering in the night wind. It didn't fall down even when it was in midair. As for his face, he had huge yellow lips. It almost took up half of his face. His lips were smooth and glossy as if they were oiled. But this man's appearance in such an environment didn't seem out of place. He reached out a hand to the woman. The woman hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. The man let out a clear and resounding chuckle, then pulled her to the backyard even faster. As they neared the backyard, the sound of laughter and heavy breathing became even more distinct. After passing through the moon gate, the woman saw the source of the sound. She saw a naked woman lying on a stone table with her legs propped up high. And a man, like a bull in heat, was grabbing the woman's ankle, doing his best to shake it. The woman stopped, slightly frowning. The man beside her gently let go of her hand, and began to take off his colorful clothes. The woman frowned as she looked at him, then turned her head and looked forward. In the night, in front of her was the door to the inner chamber. The door was also hung with lanterns. 2 stone stools were placed on the steps in front of the door. One of the stools had a blood-red mist, and the other had a writing brush. The woman stared at the 2 stone stools, frowned, and said, "Why did you harm him?" When the woman walked in, Li Yunxin was about to kick Xiao Jiaming away. He could not be bothered to see what kind of bewitchment this rotten person had. He only felt that the 4 new names he had bestowed were really good at playing. Animals were not very perceptive, but this did not prevent them from using their keen instincts to sense what you wanted the most and then let you see them. In fact, whether you were an abstinence or a Daoist, the instinct to reproduce had always been hidden in your body and genes. These monsters used this matter to make a fuss, and it could be said that they had accidentally guessed correctly. When Li Yunxin saw this woman, he also frowned and stood in place. Most people who were bewitched by ghosts would be delirious. A cliff was right in front of you, but you only felt that it was a small ditch and you could cross it with a step. But this woman, her eyes were very clear. He only had time to think about who this person was, why she had come here, and what was unusual about her body, when he saw her turn her head, stare at him and ask, "Why did you harm him?" As soon as this sentence came out, the woman, the stone table, the lamp, the paper money, the man in colorful clothes, and the night faded without a trace in an instant. Xiao Jiaming was stunned for a moment and finally saw the tree in front of him. But before he could think about the question of, where did the beauty go and why am I here, a huge tidal wave of pain swept over him, violently spreading from his lower body to every corner of his body. The extreme pain prompted a miserable howl, but as soon as the howl reached his throat, it was blocked because of the spasms caused by the pain. He knelt on the ground and covered his lower body with his hands. In his blurry vision he saw the figures of Li Yunxin and another woman. He subconsciously wanted to pounce on Li Yunxin, but because he staggered he slanted towards the woman. But the woman did not dodge. She only frowned at Xiao Jiaming's bloody lower body and raised the middle and index fingers of her right hand, writing something in the air at a speed so fast that it could not be seen clearly, and then pointed at him slightly. With a bang, Xiao Jiaming's whole body turned into a pool of blood, splashing over half of the courtyard. Li Yunxin frowned and sighed, "Miss, you killed my test subject just like that." But the woman did not answer him and only asked, "Which sect are you a disciple of? Why did you harm people?" Chapter 62. Li Yunxin shook his head slightly and wiped his face with his fingertips. Then he flicked off a small piece of flesh. The clothes he had just changed into, which still had the fragrance of honey locust, were now stained with blood. Then he sighed again and spread his hands. "It's the first time we met. I didn't tell you your name and I didn't know the details. Then I angrily asked why I hurt people. Fellow Daoist, be reasonable. This is not good." In the few seconds just now, Li Yunxin quickly and carefully observed this woman. The result was quite shocking. He walked into the Qiao family openly because he was not worried. He was not worried that someone would break in and he would not know anything. The Daoist of the Shangqing Danding sect and the swordsmen of the Lingshu sword sect were only in the emptiness realm. He might not be able to fight them head-on, but he had 100 ways to mess with them. If the two of them had walked into the courtyard, he would have been the first to know since he was already on guard. But he didn't realize it until this woman came here. This woman was at least in the same realm as him. And she seemed to be a playful person. First, she entered an enigmatic state and looked at the scenery. Then when she wanted to jump out, she jumped out. Just now, she killed someone with a move of her finger. She killed decisively and calmly. Judging from the technique, it was not the art of painting. Then it should be the art of Daotong. Swordsmen killed people with their swords, while Daoist priests were good at drawing talismans. When one's cultivation reached a high level, he could draw some simple talismans out of thin air with spiritual power, just like what she did just now. Li Yunxin wanted to see her expression and capture her thoughts. But with just a glance, he realized that this woman did something to his face. He could see her face clearly, but he couldn't see her face clearly. It was as if there was a cloud of fog in his head. It was probably some kind of magic treasure. His parents told him about magic treasures, but this was the first time he saw one. This was normal. Since there was the word treasure in magic treasures, they must be rare. If any cultivator could have one or two of them, they wouldn't be called magic treasures. Therefore, he could only read this woman's words, tone, and body movements. The first conclusion was that it was okay. He wasn't a pervert with antisocial tendencies and could barely be classified as a normal person. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that he was a deeply hidden pervert. He said this sentence calmly and confidently, without the panic of using witchcraft to harm people but being seen through by fellow Daoists. The woman frowned slightly, looked at him for a while and said in a low voice, "Interesting." Li Yunxin rolled his eyes. The ninth young master also said that he was interesting, and so did Bai Yunxin. The woman said he was funny again. If it was the first time he met her, he might have felt that she was an unfathomable master and trembled with fear. However, after meeting monsters like the ninth young master and Bai Yunxin, these human cultivators, there was no pressure at all. He pointed at himself. "I am Li Yunxin. How should I address you?" A second later, the woman straightened her chest imperceptibly and tilted her head back slightly, which meant that she was in a more formal mood. "I am Ling Kongzi, the head disciple of the Langia Grotto Heaven." She hesitated for a while and added in an inexplicable and imperceptible happy tone, "You can call me Lu Ling when you are in the secular world." Caught it? It was just a little emotional fluctuation. A head disciple of the Langia Grotto Heaven, who would find anything and everyone interesting. A noble identity. There were a total of 18 Grotto Heavens in Daotong. Every head of the Grotto Heaven was a disciple of the Master of Calligrapher. This woman claimed to be the head disciple of the Master of Calligrapher. If she was not lying, she could almost be on an equal footing with anyone below the heads of the 36 sections. The legendary Grotto Heavens were all fairyland that people couldn't imagine. Miss Ling Kongzi, who came from such a fairyland, now walked into this haunted house to enjoy the scenery, and said that he was interesting. And when she introduced her secular name, there was a hint of joy and novelty. An old man who brought a huge sum of money to experience life in the slums, casually saw the moss between the brick cracks, the broken roof with leaking rain, and lying on a wicker chair on the street to enjoy the sunshine on the mountain, would feel really beautiful. Just like that, the image of a fair, rich and beautiful woman was outlined in his mind. Li Yunxin laughed. "Well, Miss Lu, you see, the situation is like this. You should know that we, the secular cultivators, also have our own Taoist field. This is my Taoist field. I don't know what your attitude is towards monsters and the like. But in my place, I personally think there are good and bad monsters. I don't know if you have heard of the phrase, education without discrimination. Since monsters and human beings are both inclined to Tao, then if I have the conditions, I will help them. Animals with spiritual intelligence, if there is no rule and guidance, are likely to go on the wrong path. Eating human flesh and blood, harming the villagers, and in the end, they may be eliminated by an expert like you who walks in the secular world. They kill people and they don't want to live. You see, this is such a tragic result. Cultivators like you and I practice the divine heart technique. Where does the divine heart technique come from? It is passed down by the celestials. In the eyes of the celestials, are we really more noble than those animals in our eyes? I don't think so. Since the celestials can mercifully teach us the method of cultivation, then do we also have the responsibility to help other living beings who are suffering? Miss Lu, look at this world. Why is there suffering? Because the distribution of resources is unfair. Some people sit on wealth but still exploit and oppress others. And those who are exploited and oppressed constantly accumulate resentment in their hearts. And in the end they will always resist. The change of dynasties, I think this is how it came about. This is talking about the human world. If we talk about the whole world we live in, what role do we play? We have the most resources and those monsters. Lu Ling stood and listened to him. In the beginning she just stood casually. Later she slightly tilted her head, and a slender index finger slightly tapped in her sleeve. She was thinking, from the initial non-committal to the serious engagement later. She felt that what this young man named Li Yunxin said was actually very reasonable. Although she felt that something was not right, it was also very reasonable. That's why I call this great unity world communism. Humans and monsters, living harmoniously and happily together, that is such a beautiful world. Li Yunxin finally made a concluding speech. So that person just now, is particularly annoying. Why did I say he was a test subject? I originally wanted him to try to get along with these little monsters who have just gained spiritual intelligence. In the end, what he did, you also know. You are a good person. Lu Ling interrupted him. No need to explain. Li Yunxin's eyes widened. He heard Lu Ling continue to say lightly, what you said may not be the truth, and what you did here may not be as honorable as you said. But you can actually say such insightful words. Let's not talk about whether the doctrine is right or not, but you must have thought about it carefully. People who think about these questions are not bad people. You are a person with a very kind heart. She used an unquestionable tone to define Li Yunxin and then turned to leave. Since you said it is your Taoist field, then it is your Taoist field. I will go back and think about your words carefully. If there is anything I don't understand, I will ask you. Li Yunxin blinked and stared at her for a while. When she was about to walk out of the moon gate, he couldn't help but ask, Miss Lu, what are you doing in the city of Wei? Lu Ling stopped in his tracks and turned around to look at him. Dao Xing. She said, I am looking for Dao Xing. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.